Okay, yeah. There we go. Okay.
Press OK.
So everybody turn off your cameras and mute, except you, James. Don't be muting now, but everybody else.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Situated around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, ancient Mesopotamia refers to many great civilizations located here. It is an umbrella term that encompasses the Sumerians and the Babylonians and the Assyrians. This turbulent land gave rise to one of the most, I would have to say, inventive societies in human history. It was forged by a determined people who did whatever was possible they could to harness the necessary forces to survive, well, floods and droughts and famines and wars, whether natural or the supernatural. The religion was definitely a dynamic one of passionate gods and goddesses, great myths like the Epic of Gilgamesh, magical rites, astrology, divination. Of course, according to Jewish belief, Mesopotamia was also the cultural context from which Abraham arose. So today we are going to travel to this ancient land, now politically the nation of Iraq, and uncover through narrative and archaeology some of the deepest, most profound mysteries concerning their religious beliefs and its origins. So to begin with, I have to say that let's go ahead and go to the first map. I just want to show you uh, what the civilization looks like. There we go. So this is the Fertile Crescent region, and you can see here by the Persian Gulf, you have the area of Sumer, and you can see there's where it is said that Abraham was from. You got Uruk, Sumerian civilization was focused in this area. Around Babylon, you see further up the river, that is where the Babylonian civilization was focused upon. And you just keep kind of going up the river to Assur and Nineveh, and that's the Assyrians. And so, kind of like these are all in succession for one another. Apparently, their civilization, that's heart of each civilization that conquers this region, seems to be going, well, upstream. So there you have it. And you can see there's a few other sites like Ebla, which is known for its great archives. But let's look at the next picture. This is kind of an important one. Yeah, this is this area today. It has changed a little bit, but not much. And what you can see about this image, it's extremely dry. It's hot. It was known in those days and today for its blinding sandstorms. However, when it rained, it rained. There was great floods and destruction. You can see here the flat alluvial plain of the area around the Tigris and Euphrates can actually suddenly become a sea following the melting of the snow on the mountains that are beyond. You can see the mountains, to the right and actually above, and the spring rains. These violent floods uh, continued even into the 1950s when engineers devised methods for its flood control. So, because these floods are so often and usually quite violent, they were understood to be an essential aspect of the temperament of many of the gods. So, there is an equation between the environment, the natural environment, and how people perceived the gods, because the gods were connected directly with nature. Therefore, if things were not pleasant, then perhaps the gods were not pleasant as well. In fact, there was a great flood around 2800 BCE. It wiped out much of the population during this period of time. This is recorded in both Sumerian and Akkadian records. It was, of course, believed to be sent by the gods to punish the human race for various errors and so forth. But let's go to my face for a little bit here. So, the Egyptians, I gotta say, they are I'm sorry, the Mesopotamian civilization, they are survivors. And there's a great contrast between them and the Egyptians. So let's kind of go into this. Okay, so Mesopotamia is dry, it's hot, it's arid. And what will happen, as I mentioned, there'll be sudden rainstorms and things happening when it comes to the natural world. So when it comes to agriculture, this is a problem. This is a problem because the soil, um, in some places, is not that good. So they have to come up with this great innovation because the Tigris and Euphrates and there's some other rivers are not that dependable. What they'll come up with is irrigation. Since the gods can't provide something that is steady source of water, irrigation brought the water to the fields. And that seemed to work a little bit because, the gods are kind of no help. Then there's another problem. Problem number two is the fact that the soil has problems when it comes to nutrients. So they come up with yet another innovation. This innovation, of course, is crop rotation. So what they will do is, let's say you have a field and it's divided theoretically into 4 parts. So what they will do is keep one of the 4 parts fallow unused for a period of time, usually a season or a year. And during that period of time, they let the grass grow and they want the nutrients to kind of replace itself, to replenish themselves. And they have these wonderful animals that are called sheep grazing upon it. And sheep are wonderful because they learn that they're better than goats. Goats have a tendency of coming along and tearing the grass right out by the roots, whoom, whoom, denuding the landscape. But with sheep, they eat the very top. And so they leave the grass there and then they do something else. They go number 2. And so they fertilize the fields in those areas where they leave it open. Okay, so now you got fertilizer, you got crop rotation, you you got irrigation because, hey, thanks gods, you're not providing the rain that we need, or when it rains, you're providing too much in the way of rain. So you could see already there's going to be kind of a tenuous relationship here when it comes to Mesopotamia and their understanding of the gods. But then something else. Well, what about fruit trees? So they come up with this idea because, again, it's really hot. They create a symbiotic relationship between fruit trees and bigger trees. They pair them together so that the bigger trees can protect the fruit trees, which is wonderful. So this system is still used throughout the Middle East today, kind of pairing these up together. Wow, look at all these inventions that they're coming up with. And are we done yet? No, because now we have another problem. The gods, they didn't give us much in the way of mineral resources. So let's take a look at the next image. I just want to show you this real quick. So we have, of course, you have these wonderful canals, irrigation canals. What you're not seeing here is that the further away from the river you go, the more mucky the water becomes. And by the time it goes way out there, you got all sorts of interesting things in the water because what happened, you got manure, you've got other kinds of deposits. People are not very, a lot of sewage because you don't have a great system of taking care of those kinds of things. And so the water gets a little putrid. Also, if you're wealthy or wealthier, you live closer to the river. And the further in you go, the less wealthy you are. And that's a problem because those who are wealthy have a lot of power, a lot of pull. And if you read the various tablets and records, you realize there's always people that are siphoning off water for irrigating their fields who are wealthy near to the river. And so it becomes like a little trickle as it goes further out. So that's not great for those people way out there who are trying to survive on very, well, mucky water. It's not an ideal situation. Let's go to the next image. As I mentioned before, sheep are a mainstay. Uh, we see, of course, stories about sheep constantly in the Middle East, and that's because they are just this magical animal. You may not know this, but at first in the Middle East, they tried to domesticate the gazelle. It took about maybe 4,000 years to figure out that the gazelle is not going to work out for them. I'm totally serious. They tried with the gazelle for about 4,000 years, but that, of course, may be connected to the fact that people are living such short lives. They don't realize that this is not going to work. It's kind of like the idea of, hey, you know what? The gazelles keep escaping. The gazelles, they're hard to tame. The gazelles are, and the next person goes, maybe we'll try the gazelles. Wait, I don't think they're working out. And the next person, and so forth and so on. So what happens is about 4,000 years, then they go, hey, we got a better animal. It's the goat. And the goat doesn't work out either. Because as I mentioned before, the goat, what they do is they pull out all the grass. They just pull out. And then what happens is it rains. And so when it rains, all the topsoil gets washed away. And of course, everything erodes. And so the goats actually started to devour, to ruin the environment. And we still, archaeologists talk about this, we still have areas today that are still desolate because of goat damage that goes back to the 5 and 4,000s BCE. Oops. Yeah, because, once that topsoil is gone and it keeps going down, you see where we're going. Then it came up the sheep. The sheep, they're wonderful because they're not too smart. They're not brilliant. So they kind of hang out in the same place. If some people here watch sheep, you know what I'm talking about. And that's a good thing because you can just put them into a certain place. Sometimes they get a little lost. They will stay there and they'll eat the grass. They won't pull it out. They'll go number 2 and they give us things. What do they give us? Well, they give us wool. And that becomes an industry in Mesopotamia. Wool, yay! We can make textiles, clothing from that. So that's good. And also, we get from them sheep milk. Guys, okay. And I'm not sure if anybody else here has ever had sheep milk. I've had it before. I'm not crazy about it, but it's okay. And then finally, food, lamb chops. That's everything's, if you understand Middle Eastern cuisine, there's so much lamb involved. There you go, right? Yeah, goat's milk is pretty good. Somebody's mentioned that. Yeah, it's a little better, but next image. Okay, so what happens here is I was looking for my natural resource chart. I'm not sure. Is it the next one? I think you got out of order. No big deal. What's the next one? Yeah, there it is. Okay, and then we'll go back to the other. So what happens is as follows, is take a look at the natural resources here. You can see there's gold right there, lapis lazuli, bronze, copper, da da da. And then you look at Mesopotamia, and what do you see there? Oh, you see that? Oh, wool. Thank you very much. Clay and reeds. You can see where the Mesopotamian civilization, those who are living there, are also not pleased because they got no resources. That means in order for them to trade, in order for them to survive, they have to trade. Okay, so what they have to do is they have to trade their various products, the agriculture products, and of course stuff that's connected to wool, textiles, right? To everybody else in exchange for raw materials. Let's go back to the last picture, and that is, of course, how are you going to transport? How are we going to transport all of this? You don't want to just have a pack animal. And so what happens is that they will develop the wheel, which is a really good idea. So sorry, in a roundabout way. So what will happen is the wheel you're able to take more products out and bring more products in. Of course, in order to do that, you have to also make roads so that the wheel can cross over it. Hey, this is pretty interesting so far. So the Mesopotamian civilization is coming up with a lot of things, thanks to the gods who apparently look like they're not helping out. They had to depend on themselves. And what did they come up with? Well, they came up with irrigation. They came up with crop rotation. They came up, of course, used fertilizer. They came up with symbiotic relationships when it comes to trees. They came up, with, of course, now the wheel, right? And well, what else happens is now we'll go back to the other image. Is there's a reason why they need to have something called anything that's metal, and that is the big problem. Those people who are living in the hills, in the mountains, and in surrounding regions, what they tend to do is, hello, it's harvest time. You're all ready. The crops are ready for the picking. And all of a sudden, those from the north, those from the west, those from the east come swooping down and take all the products away. We need something to defend ourselves and, of course, have better farming equipment, which means that they need to trade. They need to trade for metal. So it's agricultural products and woods of different, not woods, agricultural products and wool and so forth for metals. And that's kind of the situation there. Okay, next image. And you can see, of course, we have the growth of cities that will start to come about, right? And you see some of the big ones right here, right? Uh, Next image. All right. So as a result of that, we have some of the world's first cities around 4000 BCE as human numbers started to increase in southern Mesopotamia. The Sumerians built the world's first cities, or I should say early on. There's other, now of course that's contested because others also will have the claim. These were the centers of political and military authority, and their jurisdiction extended to the surrounding regions. It's important for you to understand these are city states. So these city-states were the center for marketplaces that drew buyers and sellers near and far. These cities were cultural centers where priests maintained organized religions and scribes developed the tradition of writing. For almost a millennium, from 3200 BCE to 2350 BCE, a dozen Sumerian cities dominated public affairs in Mesopotamia. Eridu, Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, Kish. These cities all experienced internal and external pressure that prompted them to establish cities, formal governmental institutions, and wielded authority throughout the territories. Let's look at me for a few seconds. So when we take a look at these cities, again, we think of cities, and but they're not really that big. In fact, sometimes they're just a few acres. The city is a concept. It doesn't fit in with the modern paradigm. Although there were certain cities that were pretty large, there's other cities that were as big as a university campus. So, but the idea is these cities will have a religious center, it will have a political center, It will have a commercial center, like a market square. It will have a place for soldiers. It will have a place for people to live who are wealthy, nobles. Some, and then of course, develop some kind of walls around it. And so that's kind of what you have. But it's not huge necessarily. It could be quite small. So it's a concept more than anything else, if that makes sense. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through this idea. Let's go to the next image now. Of course, you got ziggurats. These were pretty impressive. They are an extension of high temple construction, and they are made to represent holy mountains. They have a very distinctive steps that house temples and altars to whatever the principal deity of that particular city state happened to be. These temples were originally built on platforms, but sometime during the third millennium BCE, these platforms were made higher and bigger. Eventually, it was decided to build even higher temples on platforms that were stepped. So there's a gradual evolution. One little fun aside, you know, people from all over the world worshipped the sky deities on the top of mountains. This is where you go. But what do you do when you live in a place that's flat? You're just going to have to build your own mountain. And so this is the idea that's behind a ziggurat. By the way, this is the idea that is part behind some of the pyramids. The pyramids um, were called mers in ancient Egyptian, which refers to the idea that they are places of ascension. So they are, in a sense, holy mountains, and sometimes the idea of the primordial mountain at the beginning of creation, or the rays of the sun, or from coming from Ra. So you have, so these are, and sort of, are artificial, but the idea is you're trying to appeal further up. When it comes to the Mesopotamian as well as Egyptian ideas of the cosmos, uh, it's not that far up there. So we'll talk about that at great length in a little bit. But because it's close up there, you can get on a tower and get closer so the gods can actually, well, hear you. On the summit was constructed one or more shrines. Uh, Access to the summit was by an exterior triple stairway, sometimes, or by a spiral ramp. Sometimes there was a bed chamber that was built within these summit topping enclosures connected to sacred marriage. We're going to go into depth on that. So I'm just kind of doing highlights here, right here. In the city of Uruk, a massive ziggurat and temple complex went up around 3200 BCE to honor the fertility goddess by the name of Inana. Scholars have calculated that its construction required the service of 1,500 laborers working 10 hours per day for about 5 years. So these are pretty large. Let's go to the next one. So you can see kind of what they look like here. This is before the restoration, right? Of course, at this is one of the best preserved ziggurats. The lower part of the structure was built by Namu, founder of the third dynasty. The corners are oriented to the four cardinal points of the compass. Let's go to the next one. It's interesting because I'm showing you this one, and I'll show you the next one too. This is a remain of a hilltop uh, temple that was not destroyed. It's very rare that we get to be able to see these temples at the top of ziggurats, because most of the time they're destroyed. But this one is preserved. I'm going to have a close-up of it if you want to see it. Next image. So I think that's, I mean, for some people, it's not that exciting. But for me, I think it's pretty cool. So that's coming from my perspective there. And of course, the next image. So they're not all the same. They vary. So this is an earlier form of what a ziggurat would be eventually would evolve from. Next image. Now, of course, I'm thinking here. Let's see here. Oh, okay. So that image. Okay, we'll go ahead and keep going. This is kind of this Uruk period cylinder seal showing a priest king of Uruk wearing a skirt. We'll talk about these seals in a little bit. Let's go to the next image. And of course, this is Inana. That's also connected to the temple of Uruk and to the Inanna context. Next image. And of course, this is a reconstruction of a ziggurat. Next image. And you could see it was pretty massive, even though this is reestablished at a more modern date. They built upon the ruins. Next image. And you can see here kind of the development of the ziggurats, which I think is pretty interesting. Next image. And then you have of course, the pseudo-mythological or real, depending on your perspective, story. And you kind of understand where we're going here. There's the famous supposed Tower of Babel, which is connected to ziggurats. The idea being that such displays of power and prestige could be interpreted as hubris towards the gods, according to Genesis 11:4. And they said, "Go, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Of course, the very idea of building a tower to reach the dome of heaven and reach God appears to cross a line between gods and humanity. For this offense, God was said to have scattered all the languages. It is interesting to note that the ziggurat of Marduk at Babylon was called E Temnin Aki, meaning the foundation of heaven and earth. And it had a base of about 100 meters square and 91 meters high. So I find that fascinating. Let's look at me for a little bit. Okay, so you're going to have these holy mountains. Holy moly. Because what will happen is this, is the gods, in many ways, although we have these ideas of gods as spirit, in many cases, these gods can eat, they can drink, they can sleep, they go to the restroom, they do things that are human-like, they get angry, they get sad, they get happy, they get joyful, they are aroused, and so the whole range of human emotions are there. But there's a sense of physicality to them. This is because the dome of heaven, which we'll go into in a little bit, is not that far above. It's pretty close up there. And the gods are on this shell, on this dome, looking down. Now, there's descriptions, lovely descriptions, of the gods looking down and goddesses looking down upon humans, looking at us from above and saying that we are much like locusts. Isn't that great? Teeming across the land. Okay. Well, then again, the Bible has God looking down. We look like grasshoppers. So, hey, but the idea is they're pretty close up there. So that means a physical tower is believed to have some kind of effect of getting a little closer up there. I know it seems pretty simple, but there's a sense of reality there amongst ancient humanity that you can build a tower. You'll never be able to reach the top, but you can understand that such a myth or belief can come about. But what I want to talk to you about is something different. And that is as follows. I talked about the inventions that the Egyptians came up with. I talked about the fact that, hey, the gods are as harsh as our environment. The gods are equated with nature. And so in Mesopotamia, they are harsh. The Egyptians love their gods. The Egyptians love their gods because even though Egypt is located in a desert-like area, you have what's called the Nile. And the Nile River has a rhythmic aspect where every time we get to the end of summer, beginning of fall, something magical happens. The Nile River starts to rise up and brings the fresh black silt from further up in this, which further up means the south of Africa, and the Blue Nile and others, and it'll go down and it will cover the sides of the Nile on either side with this black, fresh silt. And so all the Egyptians have to do is do this. It's like they kind of sit around, the water's rising, bum, 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 and then it descends. Da, 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 da. And then what they do after that, after waiting, because they're doing their work, with the soil regenerating, then what they do is they plant, and whoo, they have a bounty. And they're happy. It's like, oh, the gods really took care of us, right? Thank you so much. In Mesopotamia, you can imagine, probably pretty jealous when they have contact. It's like this: what? The gods love them, but us, we have to work, right? So we have to do irrigation. We have to do crop rotation. We have to do, I mentioned before, the symbiotic relationship. We have fertilizer. And now we're trading to get raw resources so we can defend ourselves from these people who are picking off the land, who are taking our produce. This is not fair. Things like the wheel to help us go send things out so we can bring things in. Well, guess what happens? A big problem. And that is, who owes what to whom and for how much? What? Wait, what? Well, now that we're vigorous in trade, we got to keep track of that trade. And so we have early on is the stirrings, the beginning of what will become writing. That's right. The Mesopotamian civilization then comes up with writing as the next innovation. So maybe things were tough in Mesopotamia, but they certainly came up with so much. They came up with so much. The Egyptians, life is easy for them. I like to say they came up with mummification, but other people had that before. I like to say that they came up with, domesticating the cat. But let's be honest. The cats, were they ever domesticated? Some people say, well, they did some beekeeping, but makeup, wigs, but they had makeup before. Wigs, well, they had that before too. And you kind of go through this. There's a few things the Egyptians have, but it's not groundbreaking, literally, that the Mesopotamians had. And so there's a lesson to be learned here. And the lesson is that, hey, if you're forced to survive, you're forced, if you have to go through a trial, a difficult kind of situation, you're going to be forced to come up with new ideas, to be innovative. And that's kind of what's happening here. Okay, so we have intellectual achievements, but let's talk about the origins of writing. Let's go. Next image. So here, I love this image. Okay, so this is a clay bulla. Okay, so this is how this works. These go back to around 4000 BCE, and they are to keep track of commodities and to ensure their safe delivery. Next image. So, for example, if you are sending a shipment of bitumen or sheep or a bushel of wheat to, let's say, Uruk, the shipper makes these small clay tokens in the shape of the commodity. So they make these clay tokens, maybe totems too, right? In the shape of the commodity. And so, for example, for bitumen, it'd be like jars. For sheep, like sheep-shaped bushels of wheat, for example. Then they place these tokens in a clay ball, that's not yet been fired. And then what they do is they put them in there. And so if you are, let's say, transporting, let's say, uh, 15 bushels of wheat, you're going to put 15 of these tokens in this clay ball. Then what they will do is they will seal it and heat it in the sun. And so therefore, when it arrives, let's say in Uruk, and the person sees, hey, okay, did you send me 15 bushels of they'll see, the bushels of wheat, and they'll count the bushels of wheat, and they'll go, okay, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then they crack open this clay ball, and it says 15. And so this is a way of keeping track. They go, wait a second. Wait. What happened to 2 of the bushels of wheat? Did you lose them along the way? Did you get hungry? I mean, tell me what's going on. And so this is an early way of keeping track, right? To count commodities. Now, eventually, they'll develop cylinder seals and what they'll do is they'll stamp the bullae, and this account starts around 3,500 BCE, and typically they'll have a scene carved by an artisan with an intricate pattern in the reverse relief, and then they roll it on the clay. So you can tell if it has been disturbed or not. Next image. So here's an example of some more of these, which to me is absolutely fascinating, right? Next image. And then, of course, they move on. This is my hand, by the way. You can look at my lifeline there. And this is one of the tokens. So they start to go from here and develop the usage of independent tokens that you see in my hand here. Okay, so so we're going to have, this is also used for record keeping. Okay, next image. And you can see here, this is a proto-cuneiform tablet with seal impressions. And this is for the distribution of barley, right? Next image. Eventually, drawing the symbols was much easier than making the tokens, as you can imagine. And it could add pictures of other objects too. And so eventually, it will develop a highly evolved pictographs. And these pictographs will become cuneiform. By the way, of course, cuneiform, it's a Latin term meaning wedge-shaped, and it's used to describe the strokes of the stylus. So at first, if a scribe decided to indicate a star, he would just simply draw, well, a star. But this could not represent abstract ideas. Eventually, the signs combine to express meaning. So they start to simplify the system, as you can see here. Instead of drawing pictures, the scribe made conventional signs that were generally believed to represent ideas. And so these signs then become ideograms. A star, therefore, could indicate the heavens, or could mean the sky, or even God, dependent upon the context. And then eventually, they became connected to sounds. Next image. So this is an image of the seals right here. You can see there that, so you can see the reverse. This is how you seal bulle and then various documents. We'll be seeing a lot of them today. Next image. There's me a long time ago. And I actually do have actually Babylonian a Babylonian seal, and I'm rolling it in clay there. This is quite a few years back, but I think it's kind of cool. Next image. Yeah, there it is. And so you see that's the image, and I have this, but I didn't want to break it. But I'll show you the next image. This is a close-up of mine. That's pretty cool, right? So these seals will display images. Most of it connects to mythology, although you have quite a bit also connected to various kings. So next image. And of course, you have the development of various libraries, right? So now that you have writings, they start to decide, hey, let's create these centers for archives. And so scribal schools come about. Let's go to the next image. And you can see here, this is the remnant of the shelves. Next image. You can see this is the Ebla tablets. They're just kind of all thrown around. Let's look at me for a little bit. Okay, so what happens here? uh, uh, this is the funniest thing. It is for me. We don't want fires in libraries that has parchment or papyrus because it burns everything. But if you are very much into studying ancient Mesopotamia, there's something I want to tell you, and you know this, and for those who don't, it's kind of a grin moment, and that is when there's a fire in an archive here, remember they're writing on clay. And so when there's a fire, it simply bakes it really hard. So it's like, oh, there's a fire. Guess what? We got another library that will be preserved for a very long time to come. So it's a very strange situation, but the destruction leads to the preservation in many ways of these sites, these places. So scribal schools start to pop up all over the place. And what I think is interesting, and most people don't know this, is that these scribal schools had sometimes, in some cases, up to hundreds of scribes being trained at at all times. Sometimes there's smaller towns, a little less, but in some cases you have a large amount. You mean people really do want things written down? Yeah. Give an example here. There's this king by the name of Shulgi, and he reigned from 2094 to 2047 BCE. He's one of the many kings that encouraged such schools. In fact, he says in one of his proclamations, he says, "May my hymns be in everyone's mouth. Let the songs about me not pass from memory, so that the fame of my praise shall never be forgotten. I have had them written down line by line in the house of wisdom of Nisaba, in the holy heavenly writing," he says, "as great works of scholarship. No one shall ever let any of it pass from memory." These kings want to be remembered. And that part of that legacy, of course, is having records of who they are and what they achieved. They don't want to be forgotten. They want people to remember them long after they're gone. So they'll practice various kinds of actions in their memory so they're preserved in the underworld, another story altogether. So that's why we have so many scribes in various of these city states. And so oftentimes within the noble families, fathers would send their sons to scribal school. I do want to mention that there are some cases where girls were sent to these schools, but they're a certain kind. They're called Nadito women. And so they learn to read and write, and they learn to be scribes too. But these are women that were associated with tutelary gods of certain cities. And so they actually formed during the old Babylonian period a separate class of people. So they were not allowed to marry or have children. But they also were scribes. Again, maybe a lot of people don't know that. And they're not just taught to be scribes, they're taught to be scholars, to be well rounded. In fact, we in Nippur, we have found the lessons of a certain elitum, um, he used to walk accordingly from his home to go to the scribal area. Of course, he had to make sure that he was on time because there was a man, quote, in charge of punctuality that made sure that you would not be late. You couldn't be late for your appointment. The stylus that he would use and most would use is made out of either reed or bone. And the tablets were written on, and then what they would do is the master would walk around, he'd survey everything, and then he kind of wipe it clean. Remember, it's clay, and they start again. The younger children, they'd start on round tablets, if you want to know. The rules were tough, however. I have a few of the rules. One, of course, from these scribal schools, one says the door monitor said, "Why did you go out without me saying so?" And he beat me. Okay. The jug monitor, "Why did you take water or beer without my say so?" And he beat me. Same thing. People get thirsty as they're doing their work, right? This is a funny one. The Sumerian monitor said, "You spoke Akkadian," and he beat me because he's Sumerian. You're supposed to. It kind of reminds me of those classes where you go in there, like you go to your French class, and you got to make sure that you speak French the whole time. And I guess this kid is going, the rise in the Sumerian class, the scribal class, and he's speaking Akkadian. The guy's like, oh, no, 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 no. Sumerian only. Hey, life hasn't changed all that much. Uh, Another one goes, "My teacher said, your handwriting is no good." And of course, we know what's going to happen next. Yes, yes, he beat me. There you have it. So you're going, okay, this is pretty exciting, Dr. Rietveld, right? We got the beginning of so much going on, right? You have writing. And so, what kind of amazing things are they going to write about, right? Are they going to write about, you know, um, poetry and history and mythology? And this brings in Tammy Snyder, who I studied under at Claremont Graduate University. She's an Assyriologist. And I said, "So tell me about the earliest writings. Tell me what's talking about." And she goes, well, they're who owes what to whom and for how much. What? And there's like these giant lists. I told you that at the beginning, so much of the spurring the sun is keeping records, and they like keeping records a lot when it comes to trade. They want to make sure that the commodities they're exchanging are recorded. So that's what people are interested in. If you're a business person, yay, greed. Everybody wants to keep track of things. It's greed. Good news, though, later on, is they start developing a complex mathematics. Why? Well, because you're counting and you gotta keep track of your greed. And so they start, oh man, so business and math. Well, if you like math, yay, yay. Then this course math will then apply to looking at the stars because it connects to what's going on up there. And so, as a result of that, yay, will come the idea of looking at the stars calculated through math, and that is astronomy dash astrology. Then they start going, hey, well, also connects to your body through the sympathetic magic. And so you have these notions there. And so this goes into magic. This goes into medicine, which are flip sides of basically the same kind of thing. And then, of course, eventually we'll gradually evolve to the idea of, well, let's keep king lists, make the king happy so he's remembered because he doesn't want to be forgotten, like our friend that we just talked about earlier. And they start to go, well, let's also keep track of what we have in our households and all the stuff that we have and stuff other people have, because people like recording their stuff. And then they start going, hey, maybe we should start talking to our mythology and history, and goes from there. But it's a gradual evolution. But the first part is a lot of business transactions. And you can see where that evolved earlier through the Bole, right? Medicine, though, yeah. One thing about the medicine treatises are interesting. It's really a combination of magic, prescriptions, and surgery. They believe that demons and the evil spirits cause sicknesses, and that magic could well bring them out. So medicine and exorcism were merged, with the physician needing to perform exorcisms to force out the demons. You see, you are sick because the gods were punishing you. So the exorcists, those are known as Ashapu, were the ones that are also the physicians. They kind of did the same kind of thing. Often, the patient, or if the patient was too ill to move, the patient's bed was surrounded by a line of flour for what they believe was the creation of kind of a magic circle. Next, magical figurines were set around the circle, around the flower. Then, following that, it was said that the power of the circle was such that certain demons could not enter it. We're going to go into more detail a little bit later. In other rituals, the magic circle might be painted in whitewash or dark wash to the left or the right of a doorway for apotropaic purposes. They believe the physician could force the demon out by giving the patient sometimes a very foul tasting prescription. If it tasted really bad, castor oil, right? Tastes really bad, you say goodbye to the demon. So it's like, oh, I hate it. Oh, this is awful. Well, that's good because the demon's now leaving, because apparently they don't like things that taste bad either. Although as medical knowledge starts to grow, some prescriptions were actually found to work. It's kind of like this medicine by trial and error. It's like you use something and the guy dies, and it goes, well, we're not going to use that again. They try something else and the guy lives and he seems to get improved. Guess we'll do that again. So there you have it. It's kind of interesting way that of the formation of these ideas. Okay, so um, next image. Next image of our stratification of society. Oh, I like this though. Here's actually there's a translation here from one of these. It says, if the seller has passed on, the buyer will receive up to 5 times the fine for that judgment from the seller's estate. Oh, okay. All right. Nice and strict there. Next image. These are just loving people. All right. Sumerian social structure. Um, so you have, of course, you have the nobles, and you have, there's actually a group in between the commoners and the nobles. But they're kind of nobles, and those are called the clients. And of course, scholars talk about this, but there's very few charts that talk about it. So basically, the social structure of the nobles is king and the family are generally rose to power. The king as a war leader, often elected by the citizens. He established a regular army, trained it, led it into battle. The might of the king and the frequency of warfare quickly made him a supreme figure in the city. Eventually, the role became moved through inheritance, hereditary. Around 2350 BC, kings are beginning to cast off their priestly functions. And so there's a split with the king in one place, the high priest in the other. But for a while there, the king was also the high priest. You have the nobles, you have the chief priests, you have the high palace officials. Then you have the clients, which are part of the nobles. These are really free men and women that depend upon the nobility. In return for labor, the clients received small plots of land to work for themselves. The land they worked remained in the possession of the nobility, and only the nobility controlled the best land. So what will happen is if you're a client, you're going to work for the nobles, but you're also going to have your own land. Yay, right? And it's the best land. It's the one nearest to the river. It's really fertile, full of nutrients, and things grow. It's almost like, as opposed to Mesopotamia, almost like an Egyptian dream. This is great. You're a client, but you're completely dependent upon the nobility, whether they like you or not. They may not like you. And so what happens is that when that noble dies, you're not guaranteed as a client to follow him. Or if that noble is killed, you kind of go down with the ship. So you may have everything as a client, but there is kind of something ticking away. You don't know how long you're going to have that. But then again, how often do we have wars in Mesopotamia? Okay, so you can see you basically can live well, live off the fat of the land. You can have it all, but you are insecure about having it for how long, and there's no inheritance. Then you have the commoner. The commoners, these are free citizens. They belonged oftentimes to patriarchal families. They own land in their own right. They can even sell land. It's inheritance, right? Even the king and some city states couldn't take it away. It's your clump of dirt. But the problem is, it's way out there. Remember I talked about those irrigation canals? Well, if you're a commoner, you can be way out there, where the clients are, the water's kind of it's full and wonderful and fresh. By the time it goes out to you commoners, it's like this trickle, and it's kind of yellow and brackish. It's like, oh, it's been siphoned off quite a few times. But you know what? My gum and my golly, it's your land. You own it. I mean, you own that clump of dirt. And so I kind of want to think to myself, or maybe you should think to yourself, what do you want to be? Would you like to be a client who have it all, but could lose it at any time? But, you're going to live off the fat of the land, and you're going to try nervously trying to secure yourself with other nobles should your noble get killed, become very unpopular, or just simply doesn't like you? Or do you want to have the security of being a commoner? Not really that secure, because your lifespan will be way shorter. You're going to take a lot less baths. And as a result, well, you can see what's going on here. But, you're going to have that land. And even the laws of inheritance has it going all the way through generation after generation. So it's something to think about. Okay, let's move on. Good stuff. But I think you have a fair idea. So we're going to talk about the various gods, right? All right. Let's take this down temporarily, and then we'll go there. Okay, so let's talk about the gods. So the gods, they believed, of course, that many gods ruled the world. They did not consider all gods and goddesses equal. Some had very important jobs. Some were, in charge of law, victory, sex, wisdom, music. Others had lesser jobs like metalworking, leatherworking. Mesopotamian gods, as I said before, lived much like human beings. The gods were oftentimes anthropomorphic, human in form. But unlike men and women, they were powerful, immortal, and they could make themselves invisible, especially when you needed them. Where are you, O God? They were very irritable. They celebrated with food and drink. In fact, they not only ate in a spiritual sense, but they also ate in a literal sense, with those in Mesopotamia feeding them literal food through their offerings. Food and drink were actually offered and burned at their altars, and they literally were thought to feed the gods and to make them strong. So you literally feed the gods. This food was prepared in special kitchens attached to various temples. Apparently, the gods enjoy the following: they love lamb. Sheep were typically offered to the gods, along with goat and cattle. Yet at times they enjoyed fish too. Archaeologists occasionally stumbled on large deposits of fish bones, and it wasn't fishy at all, right? So that they found it that way. The goats were typically offered to gods to divert illnesses or bad omens from a specific person, with the goat called a man substitute. So it's I guess that would be a scapegoat, would it not be? Right. So goats are the poor goat that gets stuck with that. Hey, stop this illness. Here's a goat. We love you. You get a sheep. I think you're getting the point right away about what people think about these animals. I think goats are cute. Except it's kind of cute when they fall down too, or they jump. Okay, I'm stopping. So, the images of the gods. Now we go to this next image that we saw. The images of the gods. Next image. All right, the current one. Yeah. Here's one. Were believed to have a direct connection to the gods themselves in a very energetic sense, but never fully contained them. They were much like icons, where the power of the gods moved through them. These images were fed, dressed in different outfits from day to day, depending upon, of course, the kind of day. For example, if festivities were going on that required certain outfits, they were bathed, and yes, they were even put to bed in a special bedchamber reserved for the image. Music was often played besides the images to please the deity, along with some other entertainments. Let's go to the next image. So these images, here's another actual image from that time. And so they were believed to have a connection directly with the gods. And of course, I find that very interesting, right? But let's look at me for a second here. But while gods were immortal, if unobstructed, they could potentially be killed. But with this said, they could only be killed by another god in battle and never by a human or through disease. The death of Tiamat, for example, helps create the universe, for example. Still, long dead gods still received offerings. They're believed to still have latent powers, even though they were dead. These gods then went to the underworld where everybody else went. The power of the dead gods often was used in magic, especially against evil, with an image made of this god, followed by reciting words that will bring part of the spirit of the dead god into the amulet. And Dumuzi was one of the most popular of these dead gods. So yeah, it's hard to handle these live gods, but these dead gods, hey, they're easier to work with. They still have latent power, and they fit in an amulet. Why not, right? Sumerians, did not worship their deities because they were benevolent. Humans were too insignificant to pass judgment on the conduct of the gods. No, gods were too superior to honor human morals. They transcended human morals, human ethics. Gods were worshipped because they were mighty. There is no place for humans to truly understand the gods. Let's go to the next image. The earliest known gods of Mesopotamia were called the Nuna or the Anunnaki. The name meaning the princely offerings. The term is used collectively of the gods without specific designation at first. They actually early on they were used to this name was used to refer to the gods of heaven. Anu, the sky god, was understood as their king. But by the time of the Babylonians, the Anunnaki became used more and more in reference to the gods of the earth. The earth is known as Ki, and the underworld. One text states that there are 300 Anunnaki or Naki of the heavens, while there are as many as 600 of the underworld. So there are a multiplicity of these early gods that seem to reflect ancient animistic ideas. You can see the plurality here, 600, 300. They were also connected with these early Lama deities known as the Lamusu. These are beneficent female deities. Often they're shown as introducing worshippers to more important deities, wearing a long skirt with both hands raised in supplication to a greater god. Let's go to the next image. And so you have, of course, an image of On here. Next image, next one. And then you have these. We found these eye image amulets. Eyes for the ancient Mesopotamians were reservoirs of sacred power. Energies were potent for both gods and mortals alike, and this power resided in the eyes. This is an example of some of these eye images from Tel Brak and what's called the Eye Temple. It dates from the late Uruk period. There's literally thousands of these eye images. Of these, two eyes were typically placed on the small head that is dominated by them, having a very small neck below and stump of a human body, usually consisting of only the shoulders and torso, as you see here. Next image. They were made out of many different materials: limestone, alabaster, soapstone, and black burnished clay. The eyes are either painted black or green. A few of them, by the way, have three eyes. A few of them are embracing a child. And so the question is what these eyes represent. Do they represent worshipers? Do they worship deities or a combination? But the child imagery appears to connect with fertility and possibly a mother goddess of some kind. Next image. You also have these. This is from the Sumerian temple of Eshnunna from around 2980. And these eye images do represent worshipers. In this case, the unusually large eyes represent looking into the other world of gazing at the sacred. Let's go to the next image. So here, woohoo, the eyes are literally windows of the soul. And to go a little bit further into this, I will say that the eyes are the soul. This is a great representation of it. It's the spirit. And so there happens to be references from literature at that time of those who sit and they gaze upon the deities. And by looking at the deities with their eyes, the deities, in a sense, intercourses, has a conversation, moves through them. And for that time, through that watch, there's a sense of sacredness, as well as, of course, a prayer. Next image. Then you have the evil eye. Of course, the power of the eye could be used for evil as well as for good. We saw the devotional eye here. In Babylonian and Assyrian beliefs, there is the practice of giving the evil eye. It appears to be used by both those who are evil as well, or perceived as, I should say, as evil, as well as those who are good, right? So it goes both ways. There's a few incantations I have here against doing evil magic from an Akkadian text, and it states, "Evil storm, evil eye destroying the child." Another spell declares, "Evil man, evil eye, evil mouth, evil tongue, evil spell, evil magic, spittle, get out of the house." So this is a declaration, using the evil eye to declare somebody to get out. Another says, "The one who has seized a man's feature, evil face, evil eye, evil mouth, evil tongue, evil lips, evil spittle." And so you have this proclamation. Finally, "May the evil eye, the evil mouth, the evil tongue, the evil lips stand aside." So there's actually quite a few of these, right? Um, Sometimes the evil eye can result in even little irritants. So your clothes will rip, or it rains too little, or a tool breaks, or your cow dies, or your cheese making goes wrong. It must be the evil eye. Let's look at me for a little bit. Let's, of course, an image of this here. Okay, so when we go with this, okay, so here's from one text I think it's interesting. The evil eye approached heaven, and it did not rain. It approached earth, herbs did not grow. It approached the ox, its yoke opened. It approached the cattle pen, its cheese was destroyed. It approached the sheepfold, its rams were taken away. It approached the young man, his belt was torn, and his strength was bound. It approached the young woman, she dropped her garment. It approached the nurse with the child, her hold became loose, but her arms were torn apart. It approached the vegetables, lettuce and cress became bad. It approached the garden, the fruit became bad. So you can see the evil eye was a very major idea for the ancient Mesopotamian civilization. Let's go to the next image. So the top god was Anu. He was the god of the sky. He was the father of gods. His name, Anu, uh, simply means heaven or sky. He's the prime mover of creation and the source for all legitimate power. His wife is the earth goddess Uras. In other legends, of course, his wife is Ki, which means the earth. So it's like heaven and the earth. Anu occupies the topmost of heaven. In fact, the way of Anu is the vertical band of the eastern horizon. You see, what will happen is they divide, there's three gods that divide up the sky, and it was divided into three zones. Those nearest to the pole, the god Enlil received. Those nearest the equator, the god Enki received. But the area in between, this is the realm of Anu. And so the way of Anu is this middle sky. He's not represented that much in art. We'll look at another image here. Although his horn cap is his representation, he does take on passive aspects. Next image. Well, often assumed. Oh, by the way, oftentimes he's shown not in anthropomorphic form. He's shown as simply a shape. And you're taking a look at all these shapes here. One of these shapes happens to be represent Anu, and I'll tell you where it is. You go to the middle register, and you go to the far right, and that's a representation of Anu, which of course you will see will also resemble his altar. Will often assumed to be the first or the primordial god with a obscure past. Via examining various incantations, we have actually discovered earlier deities. And so the earliest stratum is occupied by Duri and Dari and arrives from the Akkadian. It simply means forever and ever, and this they happen to be a force of creation. So next image. And you can see here a representation of An. And you can see how it is used in cuneiform, but you also see how he is oftentimes not shown in anthropomorphic form, but used as a symbol. So he is a kind of, this idea is coming about that he is the god behind the gods, and in many ways, maybe he transcends or moves beyond this idea of full representation, which you're going to see also with the god by the name of El during certain periods of times in Canaanite history. Next image. The next god is Enlil. Enlil is the god of the air, the wind, the earth, and storms. He makes everything possible. In fact, he creates the order of things, often called the Great Mountain. Enlil was initially the most powerful god in Mesopotamian religion. In fact, to look upon him was impossible. Even the gods, when they would see Enlil, would look away, right? So he was believed to be supremely good uh, and intolerant of evil, right? Um, Enlil uh, made the world habitable for humans by separating On, which of course is heaven, from Ki, which is the earth, right? Next image. So civilization could not exist without him. So without his key role. The word En means Lord. As for Lil, this translates as wind or storm, but in a curious manner that is derived back to the earliest animistic practices. Enlil was not simply the cause of the wind or storms, he was a direct manifestation of it. So you could feel Enlil. You could feel his power in the wind. It was him, which is very interesting. Nippur was the center of his worship at the Ikur temple. Ikor meaning mountain house. Enlil personally founded this temple. It was connected to the mooring rope that held the heaven and earth together. So it's believed that there's this mooring rope, this rope that holds together the sky to the earth. By the way, this idea is very popular, not only in Mesopotamia, but we see this idea even within religions of sub-Saharan Africa. You even have this with the Maasai, talking about this cord that holds the earth and the sky together for a period of time. Of course, you're going to see this also with the bridge of heaven in Shintoism and Japanese beliefs. There is this cord, this place that holds the earth and the heavens. I just think it's pretty interesting. One Sumerian hymn proclaimed that Enlil, who sits broadly on the white days, on the lofty days, who perfects the decrees of power, lordship, and princedom, the earth gods bow down in fear before him. The heavenly gods humble themselves before him. So he's kind of a big deal. The next god come across here is Enki. We'll be coming across him quite a bit in the future, but we'll just take a look. There he is. He is the god of wisdom and knowledge and water and fertility and virility and art. Enki is known as Ea for the Babylonians. He is the god of trickery and cunning, deity of rain. He's also the god of magic, the incantations. Like Enki's quite active. He's represented as a seated god with a long beard and wearing a cap with many horns and a pleated rope. Streams of water flow from his arms to the ground, sometimes with little fishies swimming along with the flow. Let's go to the next image. And there we go, right? Enki, as I said, means Lord of what? Well, Enki, En means Lord. Ki could mean, some people say, well, obviously, Ki is the earth, so it means Lord of the earth. But Ki can also mean King, which means the Lord of benevolence, the Lord that gives. So there's a few interpretations of this word. Next image. And then we have Inana, known as Ishtar, that you see here. As early as the ancient Sumerians in the 4th millennium BCE, Inanna was revered. She was often called the Lord of Heaven and was connected to sex and nature. As I said before, she was known as Ishtar to the Semites. This goddess of love was also known as the goddess of war, power. she derived from her seduction of the god Enki when he was drunk at a banquet that he gave in her honor. This warlike characteristic was acquired around 2390 BCE when Semitic influence began to dominate Mesopotamia. Because of this, Inanna is a warlike goddess that is fond of battle and has a violent lust for power. She stands beside her favorite kings as they fight. In old Babylonian literature, she is presented as also the moon lioness. It must be remembered that while she was known as the goddess of love and sex, that she was not a goddess of marriage. Her overseeing sex is in the act of itself. It's the act itself, in not in the moralistic union of male and female. It is the act of sex. Next image. She is also the goddess of prostitution. Sumerian and Akkadian love songs evoke Inanna as the power behind love, specifically physical love, for all its potency. In Akkadian, this sexual potency is called kuzubu or kuzbu and can be best described as meaning allure. While she entices her lovers to embrace, to have sex, she does not encourage them to marry or to form any kind of commitment. Next image. With that said, Inanna is still related to the sacred marriage ceremony. This celebration, which brings the local king of Mesopotamia in a ritual marriage with the priestess of Inanna, which represented the marriage between the goddess and the bull Dumuzu. While sex may have been evolved, it really was not a marriage in any kind of traditional sense, but was intended to cement the relationship through this ritual action between the king and the goddess, and so giving him legitimacy, the legitimacy to rule with the benefits of ensuring that the soil would be fertile. So it connects to fertility magic. This Inanna, or the image, was to be dressed and be jeweled for the ceremony, a custom that later continued with Aphrodite on Cyprus, especially focusing on the goddess's necklaces and bracelets. She is often viewed, next image, as the goddess of the planet Venus. The morning and evening star was connected with lions and birds too. Early on in her iconography, Inanna is depicted as nude and would continue to be so later on. Fruit trees were often planted in elaborate gardens, often surrounded the shrines dedicated to the goddess Inanna. When it came time for the harvest, to eat the first fruits from her trees, she was viewed as partaking in her sacred power. And those who took of these groves were also believed to share in her power. The idea of a sacred garden around this goddess of love and fertility would also continue in the temples of Aphrodite during the Greco-Roman era. Concerning the name Inanna, it is often understood as being derived from the Sumerian Nin an Ak, which means Lady of Heaven, Nin meaning lady, and An meaning sky. With that said, the cuneiform sign for her does not conform very well with the sign for lady, for it's Ina, not Nin, and so most Assyriologists say the name actually has no Sumerian etymology, so it comes from somewhere else. As far as the origins, next image, of the cult of Inanna, just where did her veneration begin? From what we can tell, the earliest center of her cult centered around the city of Uruk during what is often called the Uruk period of Mesopotamia, which ranges from around 4000 to 3100 BCE. Inanna's primary temple of worship was the Eana, or Eana, located in Uruk, which was once deemed sacred only to An, the god of the sky, but then it was, well, how do I put this? It was seized by Inanna. Seal impressions dating back to the Jemdet Nasser period, which is 3100 to 2900 BCE reveal a list of contributions from various cities to the cult of Inanna at Uruk, including such cities as Ur, Zabalam, Larsa, Urim, Arena, and possibly Kish. So these seals were found in so many different places. What we do know also, moving right along here, next image. Kind of moving, we're seeing the morphology of Inanna and how she's changing. But the worship of Inanna involved many themes and changed throughout her history in Mesopotamia. As noted, the central deity of Ur during the 4th millennium BC was most likely on up until the time that a temple was dedicated to Inanna, as I mentioned, after which time worship began to shift more upon this goddess. Following the dedication of the temple, priestesses then resided and were placed to her service in her worship. Accordingly, the high priestess, we're going to now get some more details that I think you'll appreciate. So why don't we look at me for a little bit? Accordingly, the high priestess would choose a young man to represent Dumuzi, her consort, and would then enact what is known as the Hiras Gamas, the sacred marriage ritual, which was to be a ritual that followed the New Year celebrations, which is called the Akutu ceremony. And this was held, this interesting New Year celebration was held annually during the spring equinox. Okay, that's when the New Year happened. So according to Samuel Noah Kramer, in the sacred marriage rite in late Sumerian history, kings established their legitimacy by taking the place of Dumuzi in the temple for one night on the 10th day of the New Year's festival. A sacred marriage to Inanna may have conferred legitimacy on a number of rulers at Uruk. Gilgamesh is reputed to have refused marriage to Inanna. We'll talk about that soon. There is something that's called the Akutu ceremony, which literally means the head of the year, which happens, as I mentioned, the spring of the year at this time of the equinox. Essentially, the day was dedicated by the time of the Akkadians to Marduk's victory over Tiamat, and it lasted for about 12 days. But on the 10th day, Marduk is said to celebrate with both the upper and nether world gods. And so the statues of the gods were arranged around a table as if they're having a feast. Then Marduk returns to the city at night and celebrates his marriage to Ishtar, which of course is the Akkadian name for Inanna, where at this point the earth and the heavens are united. And as the gods unite, so is this union then arranged upon the earth. Thus the king personifies this union by playing the role of marrying the high priestess, and then they would in turn both sit on the throne before the population and recite special poems. This love is going, in a sense, to bring forth life in spring. From extant hymns, we can piece together what happened in the ritual. First, this Inanna was bathed, she was perfumed and adorned, while Dumuzi and those who were with him proceeded towards the shrine. All the while, the temple personnel, they sang love songs, many of which are extant today. Resplendent, according to Safati says, resplendent Inanna greeted Dumuzi at the door, which on the Uruk vase is flanked by her signature standards, which are gate posts, and there he presented her with sumptuous gifts. Subsequently, the pair seated themselves on thrones, as I mentioned, although sometimes the enthronement took place only after sexual consummation. The deities then entered a chamber that was fragrant with spices and decorated by costly draperies. And then they lied down on the ceremonial bed constructed for the occasion. And then, of course, they were united. Afterwards, please buy all this And Inanna decreed long life and sovereignty for him, and fertility and prosperity for the land. She might also have presented him with a ring, a rod, and a line, emblems of royal power. The ritual then over, the people celebrated with a huge festival. So this is the Hieros Gamos. The earliest direct evidence of this ritual comes to the time of King Shugai of but the first ruler named, of course, he is the first ruler named, actually, the first ruler named beloved of Inanna was actually a little bit earlier on, and that was in Uruk around 2700 BCE. So this is kind of a hint that the ritual started earlier. It appears at Uruk, the priest ruler, the En, spent at least one night in the high priestly residence, which is known as the Gippar, during which time he consummated the marriage with Inanna. So it does appear that there is something going on, that there is some kind of ritual. So we do find texts. There also is a text that refers to the female participant only as Inanna, which is a possible indication that Inanna had incarnated herself in a priestess. The likeliest candidate would, of course, be the priestess known as the Dingir, which is Sumerian for the land deity or the lady who is a goddess. Okay, so we do have elaborate rituals. I thought you may find that interesting, just kind of diving into it. Now, you also had other festivals to Inanna. One other day is called the Festival of the Evening Inanna, which required different items for sacrifice, including domesticated animals and tools. The hymn dedicated to Inanna on this occasion went as follows. I have the hymn here, why not? At the end of the day, the radiant star, the great light that fills the sky, the lady of the evening appears in the heavens. The people in all the lands lift up their eyes to her. Look, notice the eyes. Once again, the importance of vision. And I talked about this earlier. The men purify themselves, the women purify themselves. That purification sure could be water, but most likely scholars will say purification is through the gaze. The gaze, as you saw, those big giant eyes in the earlier image. Excuse me, got a bubble. That idea is that purification is moving through them through their loving gaze, right? So the men purify themselves, the women purify themselves after the course they look upon her. The ox in his yoke lows to her, the sheep stirs up the dust in their fold. All the living creatures of the steppe, the four-footed creatures of the high steppe, the lush gardens and orchards, the green reeds and streets, the fist of the deep and the birds of the heavens. My lady makes them all hurry to their sleeping places. The living creatures and the numerous people of Sumer kneel before her. Those chosen by the old women prepare great platters of food and drink for her. You can kind of imagine that, right? The lady refreshes herself in the land. There is great joy in Sumer. The young man makes love to his beloved. My lady looks in sweet wonder from heaven. The people of Sumer pray before the holy Inanna. Inanna, the lady of the evening, is radiant. I sing your praises, holy Inanna. The lady of the evening is radiant on the horizon. Wow, what very interesting, right? Of course, Inanna was also worshipped as the lady of the morning as well, right? With a hymn dedicated to her going as follows. So there is another hymn. It's a shorter one, but I can't resist, right? It says, Honor, Counselor, Ornament of Heaven, Joy of On. When sweet sleep has ended in the bedchamber, you appear like bright daylight. When all the lands and the people of Sumer assemble, those sleeping on the roofs and those sleeping by the walls, when they sing your praises, bring their concerns to you, you study their words. You render cruel judgment against the evildoer. You destroy the wicked. You look with kindly eyes on the straightforward. Once again, the eyes, right? You give that one your blessing. My lady is sweet wonder from heaven. The people of Sumer parade before the lady Inanna. Inanna, the lady of the morning, is radiant. I sing your praises, holy Inanna. The lady of the morning is radiant on the horizon. So, quite beautiful kind of praise. So you can see that at least in Sumer, when it comes to Inanna, they seem to like her, right? You can see that. It's a little bit obvious, but she has a very interesting role. Just depends on who you ask, right? Early on, Inanna was associated with the planet Venus. She is, in fact, referred to in connection in Inanna's descent to the underworld and connected to the morning star. Of course, one of the most popular stories is according to the work known as the Sumerian Bill Games and the Netherworld. Inanna planted a willow tree in her garden in Uruk. It was called the Hulupu tree. And she intended to use this to make her new throne. So she's going to use the wood for her new throne when the time was right. But the story, of course, is Bill Games is just another name for Gilgamesh. And this Sumerian material dates from around 2100 BCE from the third dynasty of Ur. The story goes that when the separation of sky and earth occurred, a violent south wind from a storm uprooted this tree, and Inanna rescued it and planted it in her sacred garden at Uruk. Perhaps many have seen this, that perhaps this Hulupu tree was a representation of the world tree, which connects heaven, earth, and the underworld. Inanna declares, I brought it to my holy garden. I tended the tree, waiting for my shining throne and bed. I need some water. 10 years later, when Inanna was ready to cut the tree down, she discovers three creatures had settled in the tree. It says, then a serpent who could not be charmed made its nest in the roots of the tree. The Anzu bird set his young in the branches of the tree, and the dark maid Lilitu built her home in the trunk. I wept. How I wept! Yet they would not leave my tree. Since a snake which fears no spell, Inanna asks her brother Utu, the sun god, can you help me? But he refuses. So she calls upon Bill Games, who, of course, is another form of Gilgamesh, to slay this serpent who is here at her Hulupu tree. And he does so. Gilgamesh fastens his armor of 50 minas around his chest. The 50 minas weighed a little to him as 50 feathers, so it's pretty light. He lifted his bronze axe, the axe of the road, weighing 7 talents and 7 minas, to his shoulder. He entered Inanna's holy garden. Gilgamesh struck the serpent who could not be charmed. There's no magic that worked against this serpent guarding the tree. Curiously, the earliest reference to a demon or a spirit similar to Lilith and a companion of Lilith is in the Sumerian king list, where Gilgamesh's father is named Lilu. Just throwing that one in for fun. In reaction to this kind of what happens here, the Anzu bird, living at the top of the tree, gathers her young and flies off to the mountains. If this was indeed the world tree, they often had a serpent at its roots and a bird at its branches. So this is kind of interesting. The Anzu bird was a servant of the chief sky god Enlil, from whom Anzu stole the tablets of destiny, hoping to determine the fate of all things. In one version of the legend, the god sent Lugalbandi to retrieve the tablets, who in turn killed Anzu. The Anzu is often identified as an owl, but sometimes identified as an eagle, a vulture, or some other bird of prey. The malevolent Anzu bird is also called the lion-headed and pictured as an eagle monster. Well, this leaves, of course, the one that's in the trunk. We find it sometimes called a Ki-Siko-Lilaleki, who had made a home within the trunk of the tree in response to the impending threat. This Lilith destroys its own home and then sets off into the forest. Well, many translate the word Lilalaki as owl because of its placement within the trunk of the tree, where owls habitually dwell. Um, well, the problem is that it's not exactly that word. A better translation would be maybe water spirit. In this sense, Lilith appears to originally be a nature spirit associated with the element of water. However, uh, now in Sumerian, the word Lil means air. And so Enlil, for instance, was a Sumerian lord in of air, Lil. The oldest known term, which we might suggest that relates to Lilith, would be the plural of Lili or Lilitu, which is simply the same in Sumerian as our modern word spirits. So, in fact, it was quite common in ancient languages for the same word for air or breath to be used for spirit. There is evidence also that she was also called Ninlel, which brings in a whole nother idea. And Ninlel means Lady Air, who was the goddess of the south wind, as well as the wife of Enlil, and who was also known as connected with the moon. With this said, in the context of Bill Games in the Netherworld, the placement of Lil Laki or Lilith in the tree, a tree or water spirit appears likely. Still, it must be recollected that this tree was initially blown over by, guess what? The south wind. And so, how to be replanted in this garden by Inanna. Later on, when the Akkadians arrive in Mesopotamia, specifically under Sargon the Great, the word Lilaki, standing for Lilith in reference to spirit or demon, conflate or is altered to coincide with the Proto-Semitic word Lil, meaning night, which of course literally translated to a nocturnal female night spirit or demon. So right here at the first reference to Lilith around 2000 BCE, many aspects or themes that would later be associated with her are already inferred. And so I do find this interesting. Uh, Lilitu's association with Inanna is found in many other Sumerian and Babylonian accounts, often called the handmaidens of Inanna or hand of Inanna. Other epithet for Lilith was the beautiful maiden. Yet Lilith was also the perpetual maiden, for her breasts were always barren of milk, as was her womb, eternally barren for any child. Like Inanna, Lilith was connected to ritual prostitution, intended to inspire sexual activity with men, so that the resulting union would bring about fertility magic through directing this energy towards both the fields and the animals. One Sumerian text states, Inanna has sent the beautiful, unmarried, and seductive prostitute Lilitu out into the fields and streets in order to lead many men astray. Lilith only inspired sexual activity amongst the unmarried, those who are often strangers to one another and never married couples. She was not about human reproduction, either as a result of these unions, but about the energy. She was all about the energy that was able to be manifested through this activity into the natural realm. Lilith is often described as being a Sumerian succubus. We see this at times in certain literature too, but she's also sometimes called the daughter of heaven. This made her unique. for she did good or harm out of her own free will and not by a preordained designation, as in the case of the demons known as the Lamashtu. Lilith's association with Inanna is found in many other Sumerian and Babylonian accounts. This is quite frequent. And I find this very interesting. Okay. Okay, so let's go back here a little ways here. One of my pages got flipped around, so I'm gonna do it here. Okay, and I dropped the papers. You can add a pause here. All these papers just fell.
I'll just edit this all out.
Huh?
I'll just edit this out.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a little collapse here of stuff. So okay. Give me a few seconds here. They all came tumbling down. Yeah, give me a few seconds here. Go here. And I'll put it all together here. Okay. And I'll just leave these all, throw them over here. Hopefully I got them there. Okay, that was fun. I'll take another drink of water and we'll keep going. Okay, next, we got Namu. So after Inanna, Namu, mother goddess who gave birth to On, heaven, and Ki, the earth. She may have once been a representation of the subterranean realm. And so she's oftentimes appealed in magic, and she's considered the great creatrix. Sometimes they call her the lady who is great and high in the sea, or mother who gave birth to both heaven and earth, or first mother who gave birth to the senior gods. So there you have it. And then we got Pazuzu. Let's just go to an image here of Pazuzu. I think Pazuzu's next. Oh, that's Namu. Okay, so this is Namu, who I just talked about. That's a great image. Next image. There's another good image of Namu, who is the great mother goddess. Next image. And that's, wow, that's her wearing a wraparound outfit there. Next image. All right, Pazuzu. Many people have seen The Exorcist. Pazuzu is there at the introduction to the movie. Pazuzu is also known as Zu. Pazuzu has the face of a dog with bulging eyes, the sharp talons and wings of a bird, a scaly body, a scorpion's tail, and a snake-headed, penis. Pazuzu was believed to be the demon of the southwest wind. Sometimes he is understood as an evil god, the one who took the tablets of Enlil's destiny and is killed because of this. In this context, he brought diseases that had no cure. Yet another tradition, Pazuzu was believed to have the power to ward off the southwest and west wind that often brought pestilence with it. As an evil spirit, Pazuzu still could be called upon to attack other spirits for the greater benefit of humanity. He is often invoked to fight against the Lamashtu. Let's go to the next image. So this is another image of Pazuzu. Pretty scary. Let's go to the next image. Okay, so I don't have an image of the Lamashtu. That's fine. So let's look at me for a second here. The Lamashtu, she is a demon with the head of a lioness, donkey's teeth and ears, a very hairy body, long fingers, and bird feet with long talons. Often she is shown as nursing a dog or pig. She is often poised to attack the unborn or the newly born or nursing infants, making her especially a threat to new mothers, typically gnawing on their bones and suckling their blood. If she is able to touch a woman's pregnant belly 7 times, the baby will miscarriage. To stop her from doing so, women often wore amulets to protect their belly. And sometimes this image was of the bronze head amulet of Pazuzu, her arch nemesis. So, what do you do to fight a great evil? You fight it with another evil. So, evil against evil. Yet she enjoys slaying men and drinking their blood. Still, with this said, even Lamashtu is used in magic to heal. According to the incantation to dispel lasting fever and the Lamashtu, they prescribed a ritual that involves a Lamashtu figurine. A sacrifice of bread must be placed before the figurine, and water must be poured over it. A black dog must be made to carry the figurine, because I guess they have a black dog that carries the figurine. Then it is placed near the head of a sick child for 3 days, with the heart of a piglet placed in its mouth. Then the incantation must be recited 3 times a day, besides further food sacrifices. At dusk on the 3rd day, the figurine is taken outdoors and then buried there near the wall. Okay, let's go to the next image that we just showed. We're also will be talking about Marduk. So here's Marduk, right? Marduk is the principal god of Babylon. When the Babylonians rose to power, the mythologies raised Marduk from his original position as an agricultural god to the principal god of their pantheon. There. Okay, let's make sure I get everything coordinated here. Okay. All right. So you see here an image here of Tiamat with Marduk, who, and of course, Marduk dismembers Tiamat and makes the world out of her body. Let's take the next image. This is Tiamat. We'll talk about her in a little bit, but let's go to the next image. There she is. Woohoo! Pretty scary looking, right? Next image. So when it comes to Marduk, so his name is Amar Utu Ak. If you break it down, and this means bull calf of Utu. Utu means sun. So Marduk is literally the son, S-O-N, of the sun, S-U-N. Sometimes he is called Bel or Lord of Babylon. What I think is interesting is that Marduk, we'll talk more about him in a little bit. I want to mention a few things, though. Jeremiah 50 to 2 actually refers to Marduk as Bel. It says, Babylon will be captured. Bel will be put to shame. Marduk filled with terror. Her images will be put to shame and her idols filled with terror. The first mention of Marduk is in the old Babylonian Empire. Early on, Marduk blends with the god by the name of Asulubi. Next image, who is the god connected to exorcisms and incantations, who's also connected to the god by the name of Asar. By the time of Hammurabi, Ea or Enki was viewed as the father of Marduk. So I do find this interesting. Okay, next image. Here's Ashur. Ashur is the god of the Assyrian Empire, and likewise, when the Assyrians rose to power, their myths raised Ashur to the position of importance. Ashur actually may be a deified hill upon which the city of Ashur was built. We find seals here with a goddess standing in front of a mountain with a bull head, so it's highly likely. Next image. We also have right here, we have Gulu or Utu in Sumerian or Shamash in Akkadian. He was the sun god. He is the god of justice, truth, and light. As the sun, he could see all, and so can be appealed to for providing a fair perspective because he's the sun. This also makes him a god of divination, right? Utu Shamash is Akkadian for sun, the word sun, or the word Samasata means solar disk. Utu is sun in Sumerian. Now, the goddess Aya, it was his wife. Now, it's interesting that we see he's also mentioned in the Bible. 2 Samuel 23:34 says as follows. It says God, this is now used in a descriptive sense, so we're not there yet. But the word shamash is close to shamesh, which still means the sun. Okay, so in 2 Samuel again 23:34, it says God is like the light of the morning when the sun, shamesh, rises, a morning without clouds, when fresh grass and springs out of earth from sunshine after the rain. But when we get to Ezekiel 8:16 through 18, this is where they actually use it in a different way. It says, Then he brought me to the inner court of the Lord's temple, between the porch and the altar, and there at the entrance to the Lord's temple by the porch, 25 men with their backs towards the Lord's temple, and they were facing the east, prostrating themselves to the sun. And this, of course, could also mean Shamash. And so there you have a reference there. Next image. There you have Aristotle. Aristotle is the goddess of the netherworld. A name means queen of the great below or of the great earth. She lived in a palace located at Ganzer, which was located at the entrance of the underworld. The underworld was protected by 7 gates, each with their guard and gatekeeper. Ganzer, let's just look at me for a little bit. Ganzer is much like Tartarus. It's dark, it's dreary, it's a dark cavern, and one eats only dust. Unless relatives pour libations for them to drink through these clay pipes on the graves, they will just slowly fade away. There are no rewards or punishments. All the souls went to the same place. Aristotle merely pronounced them as dead. And then, of course, the names of the dead were then recorded by a scribal goddess by the name of Geshtiana. She was in charge of scribal arts in general, as well as dream interpretation. Some people say that there's a possible vegetative association because she's in the underworld and she's a mourning goddess. So those that are here in this underworld, they are naked, although there are some descriptions of them as having feathers for some reason. And sometimes when they talk, they squeak like bats. So there you have it. Next image. And so yeah, so there you go. We can see this is an interesting image of Aristotle, which most people, you can try kind of make out what's going on there. Not a great place. Next image. And then you have Nabu, not to be confused with Star Wars. Nabu was the Mesopotamian god of writing, although in the Bible, he's mentioned. There's a place called Nebo, and that's related to the same word. In fact, some people say Nabu invented writing. He was very wise and was praised for his writing ability, obviously, because he was the god of literacy, of wisdom, also of scribes. So the underworld and he have to kind of fight for that name. He is also called the announcer. He rode on a winged dragon called a surash, which has an eagle head, lion forelimbs, eagle hind legs, long neck and tail, two horns on the head, and a snake tongue. Often his that which he rides is called simply the serpent, right? In some places, he is believed to be in control of heaven and earth. At least he takes inventory of it. His importance increased, especially in later periods of time, where he's known as the son of Marduk. Next image. And then you have Ninurta. This is a Sumerian god of war. He was also the god of heroes. Ninurta is known for defeating the mighty demon Asag, also known as Sugu. I'm not sure if I have an image of him. Let's go to the next one. I'm not sure if I have that one. I do. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Obviously, this is an artistic recreation of it. But so Asag is a hideous demon that this god of war fights, um, and who is born from Anu, sky, and Ki of earth. Agog or Asag mated with the Kur or the mountains, and he had offspring with the Kur, created an army of stone soldiers. So Agog or Asag represents the distrust and fear that the people of Mesopotamia have of those living in the mountains, especially the Zagros Mountains. So there's this feeling that they are monsters, that they are demons. Well, and they also want to have their harvests, as you know. The Ninurta is able to stop him using his magical talking mace called Asharu. So what happens? The Ninurta stops this great monster, this hideous demon, with this talking mace known as a shuru. This mace is able to fly of its own accord after being thrown and actually talks with the Ninurta as he flies for various instructions. So he and the mace, this is a talking mace. Wow. Okay. Asag is able to also boil fish alive in the river. So he's pretty scary. Um, and he kills humans via head fevers. Ninurta was also known for defeating the primordial serpent by the name of Kur. And I do not know if we have, yes, next image of Kur. There we go. Who is sometimes described as the first dragon. Kur, again, is connected with the Zagros Mountains, possibly referring to the flames from escaping gas plumes known to emit at various places along the range. The word Kur can also refer to simply foreign land. So there are monsters that the Ninurta, the Sumerian god of war, fights. Next image. We also have right here Ishkur or Adad. This is the god of thunderbolts, hail, and storms, especially in the south, and he's often violent. In the north, he becomes friendlier and is connected to rain that feeds the crops as well as mountain streams. He is a great example of how environmental locality directly influences how a god is perceived. Where it's terrible weather, he's a terrible god. Where it's good weather, he's a great god. There you go. Next image, you got Era right here, who is the god of drought. He is often mentioned in conjunction with Adad and Nergal as laying waste to the land. The next one image is Nergal or Nergal. This right here is the plague god. He was also the spouse of Rishkagal. There's another god that's Maor, god of love and birth, but there is no image of him. The next image is Dumuzi. We came across him already. He is the shepherd god who is married to Inana. He is often in dispute with Enkumudu, the god of irrigation and cultivation, revealing the traditional tension between pastoralists and farmers. Inanna visits the underworld only to discover that she cannot return without having a substitute to replace her. And so the demons fetch Dumuzi to take her place so she can return to the upper world, according to one of the variations of the myth. In this way, Dumuzi dies and becomes a god of the underworld. In some versions of sacred marriage, the king becomes Dumuzi, while the priest consort represents Inanna, as we talked about. Next image is Sin. There's another image of Dumuzi. That's a good earlier one. Next image. Sin. This is a moon god. The symbol of worship of the moon god in Arabian culture and elsewhere throughout the Middle East was the crescent moon. Archaeologists have dug up numerous statues and hieroglyphic inscriptions in which a crescent moon was seated on the top of the head of a deity to symbolize the worship of the moon god, in the same fashion as the sun. So while the moon was generally worshipped as a female deity in the ancient Near East, the Arabs viewed it as a male deity. And so, by the way, the moon deity of the north was often known as there's a female that was often known as Sinai, as in Mount Sinai, which I do find is rather interesting. Okay, let's go to the next image. So, a little bit of some early stories. The ancient Sumerians believed that the universe and many of the gods existed back to the undetermined period of time, but they also asserted that the heavens and the earth was once united. According to the Sumerian, the Song of the Hoe, the sky god Enlil finally separated the heavens from the earth. With Enlil separating the heavens from the earth, it was then up to Enki, the god of wisdom, to organize it. So you can see here the representations in the work known as Enki and the World Order. Let's go to the next image, which is a really cool seal that actually has right here Enlil, and then you have On in the middle and Enki. Look, they're all there, all three there. In the work known as Enki and the World Order, Enki wanted to prevent the world from falling into chaos, and so organized the gods to oversee various parts of its operations, with some gods in charge of the waters, while others administered the weather or vegetation. Via the casting of lots, the principal gods divided the larger sections of the world into different parts, which really does sound like the division that we know connected to Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. We're going to see that here Anu receives the sky, which is, of course, like Zeus receiving the sky. Enlil receives the earth, which seems like Hades, perhaps. Enki receives the sea, which sounds like Poseidon a little bit. This follows, again, the same tripartite division that we see amongst the Greeks and the Romans. Next image. In the Sumerian story, known as Enki and Nama, or Ninna, this is a representation of Enki and here Nama. It told how the lower gods grew weary of all their creative work, and so they complained to the primordial mother Nama that they wanted to find a substitute to alleviate their labor. Nama told her son Enki to fix the problem. I like it. Can you just fix the problem? To find some kind of substitute. They came up with the idea of creating a lower life form, a very low life form, to do all their bidding. And so the idea of creating humanity was born. Next image. So Nama, what she did, there. Oh, look, there we go. There's humans there. So Nama needed some clay, put it in her womb, and so the first humans were born. Next image. Enki proclaimed, "O mother, decide on the faith of the newborn. Let Numa put the image of God on it. This is the human. I like seeing this particular image there. They're forming humans. Look like they're working pretty hard. Next image. In a variation of this myth, the gods went directly to Enki in his underwater home to find some way to alleviate their extra workload. They're tired of working. Enki came up with the idea of creating humans and so collected the clay from all around his aquatic home, and he created humanity himself. While he breathed life into the clay, Enki made sure that he did not provide them too much breath, for he did not wish for humanity to live forever like the gods. So just enough breath for them to live for a little while, but not to live eternally. According to this story, humanity then came out of the seas, since this was where Enki resided. Yet the first humans did not do very well because the gods did not bother to supply them what they needed to survive. Next image. The earth was devoid of much life. It was still very barren, and there was no grain to make into bread or sheep's wool to clothe them. As a result, humans went about naked, and they ate grass like wild animals. And I just can't help thinking about the story when Zeus made mankind. This is before female kind was made with Pandora. And they're sitting around, they're kind of brutish, and then Prometheus felt sorry for them, right? So what happened is they sat around and they ate grass like wild animals. Rivers were not around either, so humans were forced to drink out of whatever ditches filled with water as best they could, often not very healthy water, brackish water. And once again, that kind of reminds me of the poor commoners who are way out there in the irrigation routes, drinking this brackish water, probably recollecting that kind of idea. Now, in the work known as Debate Between Birds and Fish, because you got to have a debate between these two, Enki decided to give humanity healthy water sources. Thank you. And so created the Tigris and the Euphrates, as well as smaller streams and watercourses. Uh, good. Filling these bodies of water with fish to eat. He also created sheep so they could clothe themselves. Other sources of food were created from birds to wheat. So I think this is pretty interesting. Next image. So you see here. Okay, so now we move on. Oh, that looks like also Enki. So let's go to the next image. Yeah, okay. So by the time of ancient Babylon, other creation stories developed. One of the most important was known as the Enuma Elish. As an ancient Sumer, the Babylonians established that the gods existed before the creation of the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, there was this vast ocean known as Tiamat, who was personified as a mother goddess. She was paired with a male consort or husband that was known as Apsu, who represented the fresh water. So she's the salty water, and she mixed with the fresh water of Apsu, resulting in many divine offspring. Each god matched with a goddess. And so a plethora of those children were always in female male pairs. Absu did not like his offspring, unfortunately, for they were much too noisy. We see this as a problem. They were much too noisy and decided they should be killed. Tiamat protested, but her husband was resolute on eliminating them. Next image. Fearing death, the newly born gods appealed to the god Ea. And of course, this is the Babylonian story. So Ea is the same as Enki. Ea and Enki. So Enki and Ea. Enki is the Sumerian. Ea is the Babylonian form. So Ea, they appealed to Ea, the god of water, to save them. Ea agreed to do so, placing Apsu under a spell to force him to fall asleep so he could kill him. Well, Ea and his wife, Damkina, then decided to have a child of their own, giving birth to the god Marduk. Next image. Of Marduk, the Enuma Elish says, 4 were his eyes, 4 were his ears. When he moved his lips, fire blazed forth. Large were all his hearing organs, and the eyes, in like number, scanned all things. He was the loftiest of the gods, surpassing was his stature. His members were enormous. He was exceedingly tall. So the sky god Anu next gives Marduk control over the 4 winds. But Marduk, he becomes too enthusiastic, creating great sandstorms with hurricane forces that anger Tiamat and the other gods. He's just being, well, maybe too noisy, too loud. People just don't like loud gods. To the point where, guess what? These gods can't even sleep. Now, when I talk about the fact that the gods are very human-like, you got to understand, these gods, they need their sleep. And they get mad at anybody making too much noise. They do this with the gods, other gods, Marduk specifically, but they actually do this with humans. If we're too noisy, those gods get mad. Have we been too noisy lately? I don't know, right? Watch out. So what happens is because they can't sleep, so they choose a champion, and that'll be Tiamat. And Tiamat confronts Marduk. To assist her, Tiamat asks the mother goddess to create 11 monsters and to put them in service of her new consort, her new husband, by the name of Quingu. In fact, Tiamat decides to make Quingu the head of all the gods. Well, this new elevation upsets most of the other gods. They actually didn't want that. As the time for battle approaches, the god Ea asks his father, Anshar, king of the junior gods, what he should do. Anshar tells Ea and his brother Anu to appease the goddess Tiamat and to calm her down with magical incantations. But this tactic fails. Marduk then states that he will fight Tiamat as planned, but adds a condition that if he is victorious, he becomes the head of the gods. After they agree, so they must not really like at all Quingu, right? They must really hate that guy. After they agree, Marduk fights and defeats both Tiamat and Quingu. Next image. Next. Next, Marduk now takes Tiamat's carcass. He splits it in half like a dried fish, putting one part of her body high about and making the heavens out of it, and then taking the other part of her body and placing it below to become the earth. Because the heavens above were made out of the carcass of Tiamat, and they consisted of too much concentrated water, Marduk decided to stretch her skin to alleviate the extra weight. Marduk next creates stars in the skin and assigns 3 stars to each month, thus creating the calendar. He even creates his own planet up there. Tiamat's body is further torn into smaller portions, resulting in clouds near the heavenly realm and mountains near the earthly realm. So mountains are shredded parts of Tiamat that have accumulated, which is interesting. I think it's fascinating. Did you guys know that the Akatchem and the Tongva of here in Southern California, the indigenous peoples, they believe that the creator God, when he made the earth, his hands were really muddy. He wanted to clean them, so he wiped them on the clouds, and these clouds fell to the earth, these dirty clouds, and they became our mountains. Anyway, but here in this story, the mountains are parts of Tiamat's bodies that fell to the earth, Other parts of her body are still floating up in the air, and those are, as we mentioned, clouds. Now, Tiamat, what happens now? Marduk, next image, makes Babylon his sacred city, building a special temple here known as the Isagilia. Here the gods could rest while they were on earth. As for humans, Marduk creates us from the blood of Quingu. Humans are created for two reasons. First, as consistent with earlier Sumerian legends, humans were created so the gods did not have to perform any kind of menial labor beneath their dignity. And second, humans were made to worship the gods by providing the services of constantly offering sacrifices to them, both meat as well as drink offerings. So that's where we get this. Okay, let's look at me for just a little bit. And we go to the Assyrians. There's another image of the temple. Okay, according to the Assyrians and Neo-Babylonians, the excuse me, the gods, the gods dwelled in a place known as Apsu, which translates as either deep waters or waters of knowledge. Enki, the goddess of wisdom, was believed to dwell here with his wife, Damgalmuna, and his mother, Namu, as early as the ancient Sumerians. Eventually, Apsu became understood as both an underwater dwelling place of the gods, Apsu, but as also a god too. As in earlier Sumerian stories, his mate was Tiamat, the chaotic goddess of the saltwater oceans. Together, they first produce Lamu and Lahamu. We'll look at the next image now. The sacred gatekeepers of the realm of Apsu. Lamu, the word actually means, here he is, hairy, was a protective deity. It is often depicted as a bearded man with a red sash upon his head, with some scholars believing that the name Bethlehem actually derived from his name as opposed for the word bread. His consort Lahamu also wore a red sash upon her head, although in some depictions she is represented as a sea serpent, while Apsu and Tiamat represent freshwater and saltwater respectively. Lamu and Lahamu are viewed as representing their silt. When Lamu and Lahamu are copulate, they gave birth to the gods of the ends of the earth, known as the Anshar, and so forth. Let's go to the next image. So we get to the Epic of Gilgamesh. Oh, there's the Lamashu. Next image. All right. The Epic of Gilgamesh. This is the epic hero, of course, is Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. Some people say he's a real man who fought against the kingdom of Kish. Let's go to the next image. And he was deified for his heroic exploits after his death. Gilgamesh sets out to defy the gods in his quest for immortality. He is joined by his friend Enkidu, and together they kill Hawawa, the guardian of the cedar forests. But also they come across, or actually he comes across Inana. Let's take the picture down for a little bit. Thank you. Inana. Inana actually proposes to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh refuses her and tells how all her other lovers didn't turn out very well, which is probably not a good thing to tell a goddess. That, hey, you know what? I know that you want to marry me, but others didn't fare so well. Rather than keep his mouth quiet, he goes on and on. He says, listen to me, he says to Inanna, as I tell you a tale of your lovers. There was Tammuz, the lover of your youth. For him you decreed wailing year after year. You loved the many-colored Lilith-breasted roller, but still you struck and broke his wings off. You loved the lion, tremendous in strength. 7 pits you dug for him, and 7. You loved the stallion, magnificent in battle. And for him you decreed the whip and the spur and the thong. You have loved the shepherd of the flock. He made meal cakes for you day after day. He killed kids for your sake. You struck and turned him into a wolf. Now his own herd boys chase him away. His own hounds worry his flanks. So she's a little upset by it, insulted by his refusal. Inanna visits her father On and demands to borrow the bowl of heaven, which represents the Taurus constellation. Anu says, it's not really Gilgamesh's fault that you kind of provoked him. Inanna responds as follows. She says, if you refuse to give me the bowl of heaven, then I will break in the door of hell or the underworld and smash the bolts. There will be confusion and mixing of the people. Those from above and those of the lower depths will mix. I shall bring up the dead to eat food like the living, and the hosts of the dead will outnumber those who are living. So as a result of that, On says, okay, I guess I'm going to give you the bowl of heaven. And so the bowl of heaven, which represents the Taurus constellation, uh, there is this battle with Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Enkidu actually tears off the bull's right thigh and throws it in Inanna's face, saying, if I could lay my hands on you, it is this that I should do to you, and lash your entrails to your side. Not exactly a very nice thing, Enkidu. As you can imagine, Enkidu dies. Let's go to the next image. And so here you have the bowl of heaven. There we go. The bowl of heaven, of course, is mourn. It's defeated, and Inanna gathers together, according to the sources, her people, which are described as the dancing and singing girls, the prostitutes of the temple, and the courtesans. So you're getting the idea. A reason why I'm bringing this up is that it's fascinating that Inanna is so loved in that one city. I mean, look at the hymns and how wonderful it is. And yet in this tale, it's not that case. So you see how people view the gods very, very much different according to city-state to city-state, right? Next image. So Enkidu does die. At one point, Gilgamesh meets a barmaid goddess by the name of Siduri. Here she is. Siduri tries to convince him to give up his quest for immortality. Rather, she appeals that he should instead seek after the pleasures of life, inclusive of drinking lots of beer. But that doesn't happen. He decides to continue on. And so he hears of a certain Utnapishtim, and hears of a great story that could lead him to the quest for immortality. Let's go real briefly, though, to the next image. And I want you to take a look at this. This is a little brief overview because it kind of connects to this story. And this is how they view the world. You can see here is Mesopotamia. It's surrounded by these huge mountains on either side. But here you have the dome of heaven, right? And surrounded all around by this cosmic freshwater ocean. But there is a dome of heaven in which the gods dwell. And you can see the mountains. These are pillars for the freshwater sky, right? And you can see also where the underworld is. So you can understand that the gods are not too far away. They're just kind of up there, pretty close. Okay, let's go to the next image. And so we get to this story. So here we go. We'll take that down temporarily. Good. So he seeks Utnapishtim. And the story goes, he arrives at Utnapishtim, and Utnapishtim has achieved immortality. He has achieved the ability to live forever. Well, Gilgamesh wants to hear. So the story goes as follows, that the world was teeming with people, and Enlil heard the clamor, and he complained to the council of gods. And he says, the uproar of humankind is intolerable, and sleep is no longer possible by reason of all the babble. And all the gods agree upon this. Again, once again, these gods just want to make sure they get a good night's sleep. They want, and so humanity's making too much noise. So Ea, or Enki, warns Utnapishtim in a dream, and he tells him to tear down his house and to build a boat, and says, let her beam equal her length. Let her deck be roofed like a vault that covers the abyss, like the one you just saw in the image, right? Let her vault that covers the abyss. Then take up into the boat the seed of all living creatures. And so there is a great flood. For 6 days and 6 nights the winds blew. The Epic of Gilgamesh talks about torrent and tempest and flood overwhelmed the world. Tempest and flood raged together like warring hosts. In fact, it says the surface of the sea stretched as far as a rooftop. As the water subsided, his boat caught on the peak of a mountain, and so he sends off a dove on the 7th day. She returns, finding no resting place, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh. Then he sends off a swallow, and the same thing happens. It returns. Then he sends off a raven, and she does not come back because it did find food. And then he made a great sacrifice on the mountaintop. When the gods smelled the sweet savor, they gathered. This is really beautiful. When the gods smelled the sweet savor, aroma of the sacrifice, it says the gods covered the sacrifice like flies. Then at last Inana, or Ishtar, came to Utnapishtim, and she lifted her necklace with the jewels of heaven that once Anu had made to please her, and he became immortal. Now you can imagine Gilgamesh is going, what? I want to achieve everlasting life, Utnapishtim, and I got to wait for a great flood to occur? That's not practical. I'm sorry, I can't do that. And of course, Utnapishtim says, okay, he says, there's another way you can get eternal life. There is what is called the plant of life. It's supposedly located at the bottom of the sea. So Gilgamesh places weights on his feet and walks to the bottom of the seafloor, where he finds this plant that resembles a thorny bush and was called the old man, which has become a young man. And so after retrieving the plant, Gilgamesh sets it down by the side of the waters as he cleans himself off, having left the sea. So he just puts it down just for a second. And you know what happens? This is a complete surprise. A serpent appears and smells the sweet scent of this plant and steals it away. Can you believe that? Here he had, close to this plant of everlasting life. He had it, and a serpent takes away his possibility of everlasting life. And you're thinking, wow, along with the story of the great flood, and this sounds like Garden of Eden, and it sounds like Noah's Ark. Yeah, and I have to stress this. These stories are occurring in Mesopotamia, where you have in the Hebrew Bible the claim that the Hebrews came from Abraham coming from the city of Ur. And so many of these stories will mix together, right? And so what happens is that Utnapishtim, I guess little Udi, Mr. Udi himself, he's living somewhere, having everlasting life. But what happens for for Gilgamesh is he realizes that the everlasting life is not the destiny of humanity. Maybe Utnapishtim, but not for him. And so Gilgamesh, who's tired from his labors, he falls asleep. When he awakes, he is reconciled to his mortality. He says, "O Gilgamesh, you were given the kingship. Such was your destiny. Eternal life was not your destiny." And so it's over. And so the Epic of Gilgamesh was very popular. But the lesson here is for you humans, don't even try to seek after everlasting life. That's the realm of the gods. Just be happy with your lot in life. For Gilgamesh, he was meant to be a king. Be a king. For somebody else, if you're meant to be a priest, you're meant to be a priest. If you're meant to be a scribe, you're meant to be a scribe. Don't think outside of your station. And so this is very much the mentality of Mesopotamia. Let's go to the next image. So you got that, of course, that beautiful scene. This is the Noah's Ark with Utnapishtim on there. Next image. We also have the story of Adapta, the Babylonian sage. While Utnapishtim gained eternal life because of his great wisdom, the Mesopotamian stories still often go to all lengths to assert that eternal life is not at all for humanity, especially in the case of Adapta. Adapta, he lived in Eridu, which is a very old city of Sumer, and he was supposedly once a great wise man, receiving his abilities from the god Enki. But Adapta broke the wings of the south wind. And Anu decided he must be punished for breaking the wings of the south wind for this action. And so Anu says, I guess, because you did this terrible thing, you are to eat the bread and water of death. So Ea or Enki told Adapta his fate. But the gatekeepers of heaven, Dumuzi and Gazidi, intervened, and they turned the bread and water of death into the bread and water of eternal life. However, the very sad part of this story is when Adapta was offered the bread and water of eternal life, he didn't believe it really was that. He thought it was actually the other, and he refused to drink, and so lost the chance for eternal life. Uh, Not exactly the happiest story. The harsh environment of this area fostered a grim, very pessimistic spirit amongst the Mesopotamians. They sought to please and they calmed the gods. But by around 1200 BCE, the entire civilization began to lose faith in the power of their gods in many ways. Let's go to the next image. There is this one poem that you're going to see right here. It's called The Just Sufferer. It goes as follows. Here, there is a God-fearing man, and he's distinguished as a great noble, and he is working for the king. He does everything that is righteous. He's a good man, but he finds himself abandoned by the gods. He becomes depressed. He becomes unhappy. He loses his confidence, and his king loses confidence in him, as well as the court. He loses his job. He loses everything he has. He becomes destitute. he falls ill and he dies. The end. That's it. It's called The Just Sufferer. It was really popular. Ooh, okay, not a great ending. The message is, of course, when it comes to deciding our fate, we are powerless in front of the gods, even if we are good men, even if we are righteous. Later on, a version of the story is reforged, and they add a happy ending, and this becomes the book of Job. Yeah, so there you have it. There's another epic poem that was popular. It was dedicated to the god Era, the plague god. Era deceives the hero Marduk into abandoning Babylon to his mercy. The plague strikes the city, but eventually Ea relents. By then, the point has been made: the gods cannot always be trusted, even by the most devout of believers. So, again, a rather pessimistic story. Let's look at me for a little bit here. The Sumerians also have, and Babylonians have, soothsayers and diviners. An important part of the Sumerian and Babylonian scholarship and philosophy was connected to these special ritual operators. No king will embark on a major undertaking without consulting these men, these soothsayers, these diviners, concerning war or even building a temple. The diviners believe that humanity and nature and the cosmos have a reciprocal relationship, that the whole universe, everything, is connected through this complex network of sympathetic forces that are all held together. So, as a result of that, is that the stars then connect to humans. The humans connect to animals. The animals connect to the elements, which are all related to one another. As a result of that, because fate is connected all throughout the universe in certain ways, diviners believe that they can make deductions about the human condition through omens in nature. So let's go to the next very interesting image. So here is an interesting image. So, the examination of sheep entrails provides an example of their beliefs, because all these forces are connected together. So, since the stars in the sky are connected to elements and to humans and to animals and to birds and to trees and to everything, right? Even the breeze. Therefore, you can find signs within nature encoded that will tell the future. And so that includes if an animal. So what they will do with sheep is they'll cut open the sheep, they'll look at the entrails, and they'll be able to read the entrails for clues of what the future holds. One tablet talk says, if the entrails are burst at the point of entry, a king's son will succeed to the throne. If they are burst at the navel, a madman will rule the land. If the small intestine is burst, a peasant's son will take the throne. So they claim that they were able to read it in this way. Let's go to the next image. But what is the person to do if there is a dire portent that tells of oncoming disaster, disease, or even death? What is a king or commoner to do? What is a king or commoner to do if it seems that fate is working against them, that perhaps there is a curse? Well, there just happens to be a magical remedy to possibly protect a person from such evil omens. That's called the non-Burbu ritual. That is an incantation ritual in 5 parts. When it comes to magic, They have all these different formulas, all these different kinds of spells, all these kinds of different kinds of ritual actions. And they get to the place where we just kind of want to have an ultimate abracadabra. We want to have this ultimate ritual that works against, well, any kind of disaster, disease, or even death. Isn't there an all-catching way to do so? So how do you do that? This is a tablet that has the verbal ritual on it. That's why I'm showing it. But I'll have you look at me as I'm talking about it. So thank you so much, Margie, for having that up. So how do you do this? What's the all-encompassing ritual? Well, it can't be simple. It can't be simple, because if it's simple, then people will think it doesn't work. So you got to make this really powerful form of magic as complicated as possible, so maybe placebo effect, so you will believe it works. And I'm going to tell you exactly what that tablet says. First thing you do, if you feel like there's a curse, there's something bad happening, you need to be protected, you're going to die, or disease, or whatever it may be, or whatever. First, an enclosure is created, a special sacred enclosure. So enclosure rites are performed. This is designed to separate the ritual site from the world outside. So there has to be some kind of way of separating yourself from the outside world. And so sometimes they will place the person within inside of a reed hut. So they'll put them in a circular reed hut, and that protects them. Sometimes what they will do is they'll define the area with a magic circle, as we mentioned also. Then follows, after they are in this place of safety from any forces of evil, then they do purification rites. So the patient here in this position is then washed. They are shaved completely from head to toe. You think to yourself, if they're feeling sick, maybe they need to have a bath, and maybe they need to have, but anyway, then what they will have is tamarisk is used, and there'll be a fumigation with incense, excuse me. After this purification, after this washing and shaving, and after this incense is surrounding them, then the area at this point is then swept clean. At this point, a goat, and we talked about the various uses of goats, right? A goat is sacrificed, and as the goat is sacrificed, a copper bell is rung and a drum is beaten. Next, food and aromatics are offered to the gods and to the deified river that's nearby, because this deified river is going to take away any waste matter that has come from you, from your bathing, from your shaving. So there has to be, we have to thank the river for taking away this evil that is accumulated upon you, apparently. The principal rites at this point are apotropaic, and might consist of the destruction of an ominous, monstrous animal birth. So this is one thing they could do. They also could include the sealing up of a doorway with bat's blood, or a crushed spider, or a fly, or a scorpion. Or at this point, there could be a ritual of substitution, of sympathetic magic. And so the idea is that there's a substitution where you want to transfer your evil from you to it. So you make an image where the object concerned is itself, if the object itself is inaccessible. Then the final rites involved more purification. This is where it gets kind of funny. So finally, another rite of purification unraveling plants or actions, restoring the patient to the outside world again. So he is supposed then to leave the ritual space. He is told not to look around as he leaves. Whatever you do, don't turn your head because that's where the curse happened. Then he is told to go straight to the nearest tavern. I'm not making this up. And to have a beer. I'm still not making this up. Tell you, after all that, maybe you just need to have a refreshment. So after that, magical prescriptions are also to follow. You're supposed to avoid garlic, and you're supposed to wear a special amulet for 7 days. So this is the verbal ritual that you just saw. It's pretty elaborate. I like the fact that you end with a beer, though. What do you think? That's a typical Mesopotamian thing to do. Bells, as you probably already noticed, were considered very magical. The ringing of bells were believed to ward off evil spirits, and this continues in many cultures and places today. Bells in Mesopotamia often have demons depicted on them, often of those who are intended to be warded off. So if you want to ward off a certain demon, there is an image of that demon on that particular bell, and you ring it, and that sound scares that particular demon away. But for some other demon, it doesn't really care. So you ring another bell that scares them away. Okay. There are 4 kinds of incantations in general when it comes to Mesopotamian magic. I'm using Mesopotamian because I'm inclusive of Sumerian and Babylonian and a little bit of Assyrian. The first one is the magician directly speaks to the demon as an official representative of the gods. Usually, of course, gods that are known to be associated with positive magical practices. Enki, by the way, is a favorite, as well as his wife, Damkina. And one goes as follows. It says, be conjured up by heaven, be conjured up by the underworld. This form is used especially to protect the magician or sorcerer or soothsayer during the course of a ritual that cannot be disturbed by demonic interferences. And so this is where you act on behalf of a representative as the god, because these are special rituals. You can't demons, you can't be involved in god magic and official business. This keeps them away, supposedly. The second form goes as follows. The demon is, first of all, described in detail. You describe the demon in detail so that the demon will become manifest. And then at that point, when it becomes manifest, then it is banished. Often, this action is used to protect commoners from demons, but this is not for commoners to perform. You are to pay professionals to do it for you. Another form, the third form, also includes a description of the demon, but focuses upon what directly they have caused in the way of harm. So you're going to be looking at what they caused. There is even a narrative that's included. Oftentimes there is a story that is told. One story goes, Marduk observes something and goes to his father Ea asking what he should do. Ea responds, my son, what is it that you don't know? What can I add? All that I know, you know. But Ea then gives Marduk specific advice anyway. In this sense, this incantation takes from a sacred tale or text, and through this tradition, the magical invocation is preserved exactly and is believed to have the power needed for the protection of whatever the need is required. There's another word for this, and that's called a storiola. So the idea is that you tell a certain story that comes from a myth, that comes from some interesting story that is to you. And what you do is you pick the story for the reason of you want what is being told in that story to happen to you. And so you tell the story and you believe it. By the way, this kind of magic continues all the way even into the Middle Ages within Christianity with various amulets. The fourth one is the incantations are also here addressed to specific cult objects, such as images or ritual tools. So through these incantations, the material objects become enchanted. So you enchant these tools with the divine or even demonic energy. This makes them more effective tools. And so these tools are then used to fight against evil. So, uh, of course, you can enchant quite a few things. You can even enchant stoves and branches and whatever. Okay, so now clients visit a magician, and according to one source, it says so client visits a magician not knowing why he's being afflicted and by which god. Did he commit some kind of offense unknowingly? The world order around him appears to be disturbed. This is according to a work known as Serpu. He is in a critical state, worried, sleepless, ill. Sometimes he falls into convulsions. Other times he is foaming at the mouth. He is often struck dumb and suffers from severe headaches. All his possible sins in this case, for this situation, are mentioned just to make sure they are all covered, since he does not know which one he caused, including the breaking of oaths without his knowledge, even oaths made in good faith. At this point, a fire is lit. The patient then peels an onion into the fire as he recites his possible sins that has angered one of the gods. Next, the patient strips dates from a branch and also throws it in the fire, again as he continues enumerating his possible sins verbally. Sometimes he unravels matting into the fire too. In this sense, as the patient peels the onion and strips the dates from the branch as he speaks his possible sins, he is magically undoing them and releasing them. The magician then extinguishes the fire, meaning that whatever has been undone was now sealed completely away. So, fascinating jump into ancient magic. Next image. As I mentioned before, the afterlife, you arrive at Giddim. We talked about that kind of already, but here's a very interesting image. The dead reside, of course, in the darkness, eating dust, ashes, and scraps. To keep your body soul alive, the living need to feed it via the grave site. If you did not receive a proper burial, you suffered even worse in the underworld. The worst fate for those whose body burned excuse me, so that they could not be buried. So one says, his spirit is not in the underworld, his smoke went up into the sky. And so it's the idea of oblivion. We're going to go briefly, very briefly, to a few others, but we're going to be wrapping up soon. Let's go to the next image. So we're talking about the Sumerians. I do want to mention that there is the triumph of Babylon with Sargon the Great. And so he brings in the Akkadian Empire, and they situate the capital at Babylon eventually. But before these people are called Akkadians, you can't call them Babylonians if they haven't yet captured Babylon. Because, hello, it's like calling a New Yorker before there's a New York. Okay. So what happens is Sargon, according to the story, Sargon, by the way, his name means righteous, or true king. He ruled for 51 years, and he was founder of the Akkadian Empire. But there's a myth story I do want to bring together. He It was said that he had been an illegitimate child who was abandoned, and he himself tells the story. He says as follows. He says, "My priestly mother conceived me, secretly brought me to birth, set me in an ark of bulrushes, made fast my door with pitch. She consigned me to the river, which did not overwhelm me. The river brought me to Akai, the farmer, who brought me up to be his son. During my gardening, the goddess Ishtar or Inana loved me, and for all these years, the kingship was mine." And I think it's interesting because this sounds a lot like the story of Moses. Also, Romulus and Remus. So this great Akkadian king bringing about the Akkadian Empire that will become obviously the Babylonian Empire will expand, right? Will expand. And so he will conquer, eventually, he'll conquer to the Mediterranean, all the way to the highlands of Persia, the Caucasus to the Persian Gulf. And so, unlike before, this is why I'm bringing it up, and this is why we're heading towards the end. Unlike before, remember, Mesopotamia always struggled with the fact that they didn't have the raw resources. They were stuck in the Fertile Crescent, and they got wool and they got, clay. But what happens is Sargon is able to conquer the areas that has the raw resources so they can become rich. They don't have to depend on anything. It's part of their own empire. He has his daughter. Her name is Enheduanna, and she wrote various beautiful works dedicated to Inanna. In fact, Enheduanna talks about how Inanna herself is an extremely powerful goddess. She likens Inanna to a great storm bird who swoops down on the lesser gods and sends them fluttering off like surprised bats. Uh, she talks about the fact that Inanna has equal status with the supreme god On. And so there is this lifting up of these excuse me of these of Inanna in her place. Let's go quickly to some of the other sources. Let's go to the next image. That's Sargon. This is Enheduanna. There's a representation of her. Uh, so she writes great poetry. In many cases, they will consider one of the earliest literary figures. And because she does write poetry, as opposed to Sargon, the prose. Interesting, very powerful, important woman. Move on to the next image. And here we have this right here is the let's just keep on going. Actually, because we're running out of time. Of course, that's Naram Sim. Let's go to the next image. And we're going to close with this one. Next image. Here we go. One more, maybe. There we go. Let's close with the Code of Hammurabi. It's the best way to end. And we'll go from there. I'm going to take a big swoop of water here. Okay. Hammurabi, roughly 1792 to 1750, he issues out a law code upon divine authority. It's one of the first very well articulated law codes, although Namu and Chiguli do write legal codes, which you just saw earlier. But this one is considered one of the best organized earlier on. So he issues these laws of divine authority. Hammurabi proclaims that the gods had chosen him, quote, to promote the welfare of the people, to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and evil, so that the strong might not oppress the weak, to rise like the sun over the people and to light up the land. It's a beautiful introduction. And how does he support many of these ideas? Mutilation, whipping, and burning. It's a nice start, and then dismount. So the Code of Hammurabi has two striking characteristics. First, the law differed according to social status. Aristocrats, those who are the upper class, were not punished as harshly as commoners. And commoners were not punished as harshly as slaves. So, second, the code demanded that the punishment fit the crime. It called for an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, at least amongst equals. So if you're both of the noble class, then it's equal. If you're both commoners or clients, it's equal. But slaves, well, but the problem is that different classes, then a different situation. But it is otherwise, as long as a criminal and victim share the same social status, the victim could demand exact vengeance. So what happens is that you're going along, let's pretend something here, and somebody runs into your ox cart and breaks your wheel. Well, exact vengeance is you go and you're able to break his wheel. It gets a little bit more serious is that if somebody kills your son, you see where we're going with this. So obviously people don't want to do that. So what they do as a result of that is that, well, we don't want to do that. So they come up with this idea, well, if you don't want to do that, then you're going to have to give something that the other person believes that equals that loss. Got it? So Hammurabi's code begins with legal procedure. Individuals, they brought their own complaints before the court. Each side had to produce written documents before the court. Each side had to do this. So in cases of murder, the accuser who failed to do so, if you failed to bring written documents or you failed to bring witnesses and you had accused somebody of murder, guess what happens? The accuser who failed to do so was then themselves put to death. Mesopotamians were very worried about people doing negative magic. Anyone accused of doing harmful magic towards somebody else in this code had to go through various ordeals of water. The gods themselves had to determine the case. The defendant was usually thrown into the Euphrates. A defendant who sank was guilty. A defendant who floated was innocent, which, by the way, is the opposite that later happens in the Middle Ages. So that means if you sank all the way down, you're guilty. If you floated, you were innocent. So chances are, hopefully, you'll be more innocent than you are guilty. Once a judge delivers a verdict, it can never be changed. There's a few other things. Other rules, of course, are interesting. Adulterous wives can be saved from the sentence of death by their husbands, but lovers can only be spared by the king. Here, a prisoner's wife can sleep with another man if there is nothing to eat in their house. It's just strange. Men wishing to divorce their wives must compensate them financially, and widows have use of their husband's property as long as they live. So there is some fair laws, and there's some very strange ones amongst them all. But the important thing to remember when it comes to Mesopotamia is that it's an evolving civilization, because we're moving through the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and then, of course, eventually we're going to get to the Neo-Babylonians and the Persians. But it's shifting. However, with that said, I want to make it very clear, the environment has everything to do with how they view their gods, how they view nature, and how nature treats this land about the Tigris and Euphrates, wedged in by these ferocious mountains, but with the desert in between, and with floods at any given time, and then followed by periods of long dry heat and winds. There's so much when it comes to stories about the hostile winds, or almost viewed as demonic in themselves. So you want to make sure that you have Enlil's wind to purify, to push away that which is evil. But you still have this notion that, yes, the gods are there. Yes, they are important to many of the city states, but there is this sense, this resolute sense that we still have to realize that while we may worship the gods and the goddesses, and we may value them depending upon city states, that still we have to realize we have to try to do our best, even on our own, and to realize that they too may fail us, that this world is not a perfect world, that it is prone to disaster. It's prone to something happening at any moment, at any time. Think about it. When we think about this civilization, you're going to have at any time these people coming down from the mountains and sweeping up and taking your harvest away. At any time, you're going to have a war. At any time, you're going to have pestilence covering this land. This is not, and of course, a flood, right? And so this is not a stable society. If you do archaeology in this region, you take a look at the stratum and you see that it's constantly disturbed. There's always fires, there's always floods, there's always evidence of destruction. It is not a stable place. But at the same time, think about what this civilization gave to humanity. It gave us so many great innovations, ideas. Now, yes, you're going to have situations where ideas happen in other places around the globe and they invent these ideas separately. Yes, but we're talking about the inception of these ideas happening here affect so many other civilizations directly from this location. So it's still just as important historically. And the reason why all these innovations came about is the very fact that they had to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and be able to try to survive and come up with innovative ideas outside the box, like irrigation or the wheel or, hello, writing, which we do today. And so we have much to thank from this civilization that's forged in adversity, and the human spirit rose through. But as an added note, I still want to make it very clear that amongst many of the city states, their own patron god and goddess they were still beloved within that context. And you can see this tug of war when it comes to Inanna, where she's absolutely loved in inscriptions, but also absolutely not in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So it just depends. So thank you so much, and I hope you have closed down the image, and I hope you have a great evening, and blessings to you all.